Serious, parents of Reddit, what was a legit reason why you didn't let your son/daughter have that friend over go to a sleepover? A relatively new male friend of my 13-year-old came over for the first time, and when I say come over, I mean climbed over a 6-foot cinder block privacy fence to surprise 13-year-old with an engagement ring, plastic, and a plant, stolen from neighbor. Full stop. She was then invited on his family's vacation. She did not go. Our romance is truly alive and well, I see. He was a little kleptomaniac. He came over exactly 3 times to hang out. Each time something would go missing. No more visits. Found out recently he was recently charged with embezzlement at the company he used to work for. Good for him, he evolved into embezzler instead of armed robber or petty thief. That is a hugely better way to go. I hated not letting the child sleep over, but that would have meant that my child would have wanted to sleep over at his house. His mother was living with a very abusive man who raised every single hair on my neck. This man taped off areas where my son's friend could walk and sit, rationed food, etc. I was not about to let my son be in that environment. The friend started acting out from abuse. I had already talked to the school counselor about my suspicions and CPS was involved. It was hard to explain to a child of 8 why this friend couldn't come over. I was a situation that set off my early warning senses. We were staying at the house of the daughter of my in-laws' friends. She had a 3-year-old son. My daughter was 5. They played well together, but I got some weird vibes that told me that my daughter shouldn't be crashing in the living room in a sleeping bag. I had her sleep with my wife in the guest bed while I slept on the couch. I kept a close watch on the kids the rest of the evening. The next day as we were leaving, the 3-year-old basically tackled my daughter. He was big, she was very small, and tried to mount and hump her on the floor. I extracted her and told him that wasn't appropriate. My daughter laughed it off as him trying to wrestle with her. Once in the car I told my wife under no circumstances would our daughter ever be allowed back in that house. Ever. She agreed. We later learned that the then boyfriend of the woman with the son used to let the boy watch hardcore P with him. Mum found out when CPS got involved. Stopped my daughter staying at her friend's house when I found out the friend's mum was an alcoholic who was going out every night to the pub and bringing random guys home for the D. Happened every time she slept there and the mum didn't know the guys' names half the time. My parents went to drop off my stuff at a friend's house because I wanted to spend the night. They walked in, and my dad said nope, you're coming home. She had 2 brothers, one was super nice, one was very touchy. Her dad then threatened my dad and said he can't take a child out of his home without his permission. My dad being 6'3" and a large dude got in his face. Her dad looked like a string bean and said he was taking me home right now. My dad told me later he had a really bad gut feeling something bad would have happened if I stayed. Her touchy brother is in jail now, for what I'm not even sure. When I was in middle school my friend was a bit goth and tough looking. I was a good kid and my parents knew it. My mom didn't want me hanging out with my friend because she thought she would be a bad influence on me. I told my mom that wouldn't happen and that I would be a good influence on her. My mom said okay. My friend was not bad in any way. She just liked goth clothes. Turned out she was a good student and she lived in a mansion and was super nice. We went to Six Flags Fright Feast and she got me over my fear of throwing up on a roller coaster. Leslie, you were a really good friend and your dogs were super cute. I hope you are happy in life. I'm so glad this one had a happy ending. Completely disrespectful to our home. After multiple times telling them not to. My daughter is 6. She's 12. We live in the same complex. She'd constantly leave trash all outside, on our stairs, inside our couch, floor to where the baby can get, makeup paint all over our carpets. She didn't care. Last and final sleepover, she invited a kid we didn't know to stay with her too. I felt bad because the girl was younger, until it was 1 AM and they were blasting music, yelling, and dancing. We live on the 2nd floor. Told them to go to bed. 7:30 am. Same exact thing. She started coming over first thing in the morning, staying until late at night. I told her if she was hungry, she had to go home and eat and come back. 2 doors down, as we didn't have enough food to feed everyone. My husband has been out of work, and we're really struggling. She wouldn't. Whatever snacks we had for our 3 kids were gone in a day. Come to find out, she wasn't allowed at home while her mom was at work because her 24-year BF was at home and she's getting boobs, so she didn't need to be home alone with him. So much wrong with that statement, but true. Just last week the mom sent her to another state for a bit. My daughter misses her, but it's been nice not having my place full of kids. She'd bring friends all the time, all day every single day, and eating all the food we don't have. The father of one of my daughter's classmate, she was only in 2nd grade, kept repeatedly telling my daughter to come spend the night over there. She told me about it, so I made sure to catch him one day, and he said in a very strange way, "Oh, she's welcome to spend the night anytime," and he won't look at me. Plus the way he looked at her just creeped me out. Mind you, he is a single father, so there's no other adult in the house to monitor him. I don't even know how I would react to a grown man repeatedly asking my daughter that. I hope his kid is okay too. Sheesh, these are sad. My mom wouldn't let me stay at a friend's house when I was a kid because she didn't like how messy their house was. Growing up, there were certain friends whose house I wasn't allowed to stay at. I never knew why my dad wouldn't ever let me go certain friends' homes until I got older. My dad was in law enforcement, so he knew which of my friends had more dubious parents. One of my really good friends in elementary, his dad had a pretty sketchy history, and it turned out later his dad kidnapped someone and led the police on a wild chase in another state. Good old dad just keeping me safe. My oldest kiddo has an incredibly gentle soul and is very into ballet. He had one friend come over to a sleepover that I ultimately sent home after he made fun of my son for loving ballet and then smashed ants from my son's ant farm in front of my son. I get that he was little, but man, not letting anyone who makes my kid cry like that and doubt how awesome he is in my house again. I don't care how much this kid's mom needs a break. Nothing wrong with ballet. Heck, my high school has a dance for athletes class and they still do a performance. It's a hobby which teaches agility and is good physical activity, I'd assume. I never did crap like that, and sure, I can lift plenty of weights with the physical activity I do, but I'm as graceful as a shopping cart carrying a refrigerator. My daughter was 5 at the time. There was this kid, son of a coworker. Coworker was cool. My daughter got along with this kid on the playground, so we decided to do the playdate thing. The kid couldn't handle sharing his toys, so he started biting. Biting is basically the kid equivalent of whipping your dong out at a Chuck E. Cheese, which, ironically, is much less of a big deal if you do it while you are still a kid. So we were out of there. Coworker apologized profusely and asked if we could have a do-over at our place. Figured, not an issue because his toys weren't in play. Nah. Then he started biting because he wanted her toys. When I was little, I became aware that biting was probably my most formidable weapon. I'm sure it's a phase we all have. I vividly remember how much more it hurt when my mother bit me, lol. She never had to say anything before or after. Recently my nephew had his own biting phase, until his mother bit him in the same way mine did. Crap works. My parents always refused to let me go over to that friend's house. She could come to our house, but I couldn't go over there. I always threw a fit about it in the moment. We grew apart over the years. As an adult, I had to interact with her family through my job in law enforcement. My parents never said why I couldn't go over there. They didn't want my kid mouth to tell everyone at school that Jean's parents were users dealers and that their live-in uncle was a registered sex offender. I learned the truth as an adult and respect my parents for being gentle and giving white lies regarding the situation. I'm sure my dumbass kid self would have bluntly mentioned it to Jean and it would have hurt her. I'm sure she had it hard enough in that environment anyways. Not bad. And he could stay over. My brother was in the closet, but my parents knew and he wanted his friend to spend the night. My parents said yes, but they had to sleep in the living room. He then got pee off and it didn't happen. Nice try, buddy. We've all been blocked by our parents. It's so infuriating at the time, and then you grow up and it's like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Lmao. 2 different friends with moms that smoked M. One in 5th grade and one in 6th. They actually both lived with us at one point or another. The kid in 5th grade was a nice guy, a little hyper and kind of mischievous, but had a really good heart when you take him home environment into account. He ended up staying with us for a week when his mom lost the house they lived in. I think after that he went to live with a relative. I didn't see him again until we were adults and he just happened to come into my work. He's a bodybuilder now. My mom stopped letting me go over to his place long before he came to stay with us though. Apparently one time his mom just straight up asked my mom if she wanted to smoke some M with her, which he declined and quickly got us the frick out of there. The kid in 6th grade was introduced to me through a mutual friend. I came home from a weekend at his place and told my mom about my time over there. She asked me a bunch of follow-up questions, ending with does it smell like they have cats? I told her yes, and she asked but they don't have any cats, do they? And I said no, I didn't see any. She gave me a solemn look and said that I wasn't allowed to go there anymore, but he was allowed to stay over here. After a few years of us being friends, his mother dropped him off at my place one night with no warning. He and I didn't know what was going on, but I know now that his mom had a heart-to-heart with mine, saying that she knew she was going to be arrested soon, and that our house was the safest possible place for her son, as my mom was the only person she was even acquainted with that wasn't a drug addict. This kid and I had become extremely close over the years, and my mom loves him very much, so without blinking she agreed to take custody of him. So he became my adopted brother, sort of. Flash forwards. A CPS agent is at our door with a custody release form. She tells my mom that my friend brother's dad has been cleared to take custody. My friend wants to live with his dad more than anything, so my mom tearfully gives up custody. I see him at school a week later, and he tells me he's been put in a foster home. He was never going to his dad's at all. It took years for him to believe that CPS had deceived my mother into giving up custody, and that we didn't just give him away. It makes me want to cry thinking about him feeling like we abandoned him. He graduated high school in the foster care system and joined the Marines. I haven't seen him in 6 years. I miss my brother. I had a friend from school who was a year younger, so I was like 10, he was 9, and I came over to his house and played some hockey outside. Then we got bored and we started tackling each other and rolling around on the grass. After that we went inside and watched Hotel for Dogs. Well, the next day my friend comes over and says you can't come over anymore. I say why not? Then he said my mom thinks you're gay. Then basically the friendship died that day. I'm 10 and I'm not gay, like WTF. His mom was a police officer too, she should have known we were playing. That's awful. I didn't know it at the time, but my best friend growing up was gay. Gay wasn't even a thing that registered to me. Michael just liked to play dress up, get makeup done with my sisters. Little weird, but whatever. He is a cool dude. My parents' older siblings however totally knew, and they couldn't have given less of a crap. I only found this out 15 plus years later, but no one ever came to my birthday parties as a kid in elementary school. I had an abusive family life where I would come into school with a lot of unusual bruises and regularly I had dirty clothes and hair. I thought it was perfectly normal because that's all I knew. I was always welcome at other homes but no one would come to mine. A friend of mine's mother told after I had moved out and was on my own in college that she always worried about my home life and wouldn't let her daughter over because she was so concerned. It took a lot of time and therapy to come to terms with that. Not that she wouldn't let her daughter come over out of concern, but that she didn't have enough concern to say anything about me. Your last sentence resonates with me so much. It's a very specific feeling of betrayal. I was the kid in this situation. I was 10 years old, and I had a very self-obsessed friend, but it was no biggie until she started stealing from me, and then from my sister, and then from my parents. Each time she came, something was missing. When it was me, I blamed my sister. When it was my sister, she blamed me. We didn't really realize it was her until money that was around the house started disappearing. My mom did 1+1 and told me to tell her she's not allowed to be my friend anymore. I was sad about it, but it was also kind of a relief. IDKY, but it felt very high maintenance to be friends with her. I was around 10-11 and I could feel like I was happier and had more freedom. Does that make sense? I had a gut feeling that something was just off about a young man that my son was friends with, but couldn't put my finger on it. I refused to let him stay over because of that gut feeling. Years later, it came out that he assaulted a mutual female friend in her sleep. As a parent, I never had to make this decision. My child and I had coded responses with each other. I knew from my own experience that these situations can be very tough and your school friends sometimes try to pressure to do things you don't want to do, especially if they have their own agenda. Basically, if my child said, "May I go do this?" I knew she really wanted to and felt comfortable, so my answer was yes unless we had family stuff to do. If she said, "Can I knew she felt uncomfortable or pressured into asking, so I would have her back and say number. I always trusted my child first and gave her the power to communicate, learn to trust her own gut and be confident. We made up codes between the two of us for her entire growing up. It worked so well during her teenage years. If she was uncomfortable at a party or situation, she would text me a certain phrase and I knew she wanted me to call her with a reason to leave. We also never had curfews. Each event was different. We would talk about it and decide together what time she would be home. Now as a grown up, she has thanked me a lot and said this was one of the best things I did for her growing up. She always felt like we were in it together. We were, and she is turning out to be an amazing person. This was a very rewarding part of being a parent. Not her parent, but my sister is 9 years younger than me. Wouldn't accept her ex-boyfriend. Not being toxic and the whole defensive act some big brothers do. I just didn't like the guy. He was super emo and I could just see some light in my sister going out. He was really possessive of her and whispering like freaking worm tongue in her ear all the time. Weird stuff now, not like whispering secret little jokes but whispering conversations. I assumed they were mocking me or my family. I ended up making a demand that he not be in the house if I was home. Not something I have ever dreamt of doing before or since. Turned out he was whispering super dark crap about suicide, self-harm, as well as subtly belittling and completely emotionally blackmailing her. She broke down and told my mum all about it. Thankfully, they then broke up, but he hung around trying to contact her for ages. He'd be telling her that if she didn't go back to him that he'd hurt himself etc etc. It took a while but it fizzled out. She was back to herself in no time, thanks to Jesus. Fast forward 10 years, I'm on an A&E shift. I assess some poor girl who has addiction and mental health problems. She'd had a few suicide attempts in the last year. Lo and behold, who's her boyfriend? The same scrawny little bollocks. He refused to acknowledge my existence when I assessed her. He just sat there looking at her and grinned. Not smiling but bloody grinning the whole time. Psychopath. This didn't happen to me, but one time my cousins, 8 and 10 years old, wanted to have this older kid, just turned 18, over from their church to spend a night. The guy wasn't really weird at all and seemed nice and I'd hung out with him a lot, but their mom just didn't feel right about it and said no. About 2 years later it came out that he had been molesting kids at another church he was going to and had gotten arrested. Crazy stuff. My kid is not allowed to go to his friend's house down the street. Too much police activity there, including a friend of that family arrested for selling drugs from there while visiting. No whoop. I have told him it's not a safe house, and his friend can come here but he can't go there. There are other reasons why I don't trust their judgment, but I figure the drug stuff is enough, right? Not parent, I was the kid. Used to be friends with this girl that I met at sporting events around 10 times a year, and I would always want to hang out with her and spend a lot more time with her than I was ever allowed to. She gave my parents a really off vibe, and apparently used to ask really inappropriate questions. My parents wouldn't let me go to hers at all. A month ago, she was imprisoned for killing her ex-fiancé by beating him, tying him to a car and dragging him before stabbing him multiple times and then setting his body on fire. She had help, but she was the main one. Dodge a bullet there. Dad is a chain smoker and smokes in the house. We'll have my daughter's friends stay over, but we'll find an excuse to have her take a shower early on, go to the park, swimming, etc. Our daughter can't stay there overnight, and even if she is there for a few hours, she showers and changes clothes as soon as she gets home. Years ago we had new neighbors move in across the street that had a daughter that was a year younger than mine. They introduced her one day and suggested that we get the girls together to play over at our house. They had seen we had a swing set and trampoline. I just smiled and said, oh yeah, maybe we can do that. I had a bad feeling about them and their daughter, so I kept my kid away from theirs, and I'm glad I did. This girl, who at the time was about 8, got found many times on the roof of their porch. Would go start the car, climb all over the car, play in the street, which our street is pretty busy. She cussed like a sailor, and when she was about 10-11 gave a little neighbor girl of about 5 or 6 a cup of her pee to drink. I'm glad I listened to my gut. I have a compromised immune system and the kids aren't vaccinated. It happens we will be somewhere the kids make friends. I go talk to the parents about setting up a playdate and find out they don't vaccinate. Can't risk my health. I feel so bad for unvaccinated children. It's not their fault but they will deal with so many consequences. My dad never allowed me to sleep over at my friend's house. He said that my friend's dad looked like a pedophile. He was. My dad may have been passed out drunk pretty much all of the time, but he also always tried to be the best dad he could to me. It didn't work all the time, but God bless him, he tried. I only allow sleepovers with close family and friends due to my childhood, but assuming that was not the case, the girl next door asked for a sleepover. She was maybe 8, and my daughter was 6. This was about 6 months ago. The first time the girl came over to play, she told me to put my macaw in his cage where he belongs because birds should be in cages and she didn't like him. I told her she could go back outside if she didn't want to be near him, but I would not lock him up. She also informed me that she was going to need me to make her dinner right now because she was hungry. It was not even 4 PM and she had not been invited for dinner. She was extremely demanding and disrespectful. She complained about the snack I gave her even when the girls went to play outside. She made my daughter cry 3 times in maybe 40 minutes. This was the first and only time she was allowed to play with my daughter. When I told her it was time for her to go home, she asked to spend the night. I told her no. Then she informed me that her parents, who I have never met, had already said my daughter could spend the night with her. I again said no. She demanded to know why, and I told her that I would have had to know her family personally for several years before I would entrust my daughter with them. I left out the part where she was extremely disrespectful, and obviously had no discipline and had never been told no in her life. Not that it made a difference, but my daughter is high functioning autistic, so if something were to happen that she did not have the emotional or verbal skills to tell me about, I would never know. I have told the girl no every time since that she asked to play with my daughter. 9 times out of 10 it's because I don't trust the friend's parents. I had neighbors recently that would train their kids to claim other people's kids did something, that is, broke a TV that was already broke, etc., to try to get money put on them. Some parents will claim their kid said something happened just to start drama, like that your kid touched their privates or something. There are a lot of sick and manipulative people out there. I was that kid that wasn't allowed near my friend. He had started getting into drugs and other stuff a year before then. He tried to commit suicide at 17 and his parents didn't know which of his friends were the bad element, so they cut everyone off. He was one of my closest friends, but I understood the parents' decision. I never did see him again after that. I saw on Facebook years later he had joined the military and was deployed to Iraq. I haven't checked up on him in 10 years or so. Hope he's okay. Miss you, Chris. My closest friends were all allowed to spend the night, but it was so difficult, if not impossible, to get a lot of other school friends to spend the night. Excuse after excuse would come each time I'd invite them, but I was always invited to come stay at their house instead. When I got quite a bit older, one of the guys finally admitted that it was because my mom was a lesbian and their parents weren't comfortable with them being over there. Texas in the 90s. It never occurred to me one single bit when I was younger though, and suddenly a lot of that made sense. So when I was a kid, before contouring and highlighting and all the crazy makeup kids put on to just go to high school was around, my mom said I couldn't hang out with this girl Amy because she wore black eyeliner and only wear black eyeliner. I rallied. Told her she can't judge a person based on eyeliner. I mean, that's freaking insane. After 28 years of best friendship, Amy started sending nudes to my dipshit husband. Mom was right. I should have listened to her back in 1990. Parents of Reddit, what is something your child has done that you can never forgive them for? This is my second one. My grandmother gave me her coin collection before she died. Every silver dollar, half, quarter, dime, nickel and penny form every year since 1885. Also, most mints as well. Every silver certificate, every bill, everything except 50s and 100s. This was her masterpiece and her pride and joy. My stepson took the entire collection and spent it at face value. Took it from a safe box that I never opened. I only found out it was him because I went through his room, and when I picked up his shorts, he obviously had a ton of coins in the pocket. Reached in, pocket was full of just pennies. At closer look, of course they were steel pennies, wheat pennies, etc. My grandmother never forgave my aunt for faking a miscarriage for attention after my mother revealed she was pregnant with me. Both my aunt and mother are mentally unstable. My grandmother told me this about a month before she died. She also said I was the daughter she never had and to never trust either of them. Before then she had never spoken an unkind word about anyone that I can remember, so needless to say it has stuck with me and I'm now estranged from my family. I have an old friend who pulled crap like this for a long time. She faked a miscarriage and then married a guy she wasn't really into because she just wanted to have a wedding. I've never really gotten into it with her about it, but I wonder if she's ever really given much consideration to how badly she's hurt people with these stunts. This story is kinda the opposite of the question. My mother forgave me for something I never thought she would. This was a few years ago. I had lost my job and was going broke quickly. I needed money for rent and bills, and I really had nowhere to turn. One day I just panicked and committed an armed robbery to get a few bucks. I figured that if I wasn't caught immediately, I would get away with it. 5 days later the police are at my door. They take me to the station and charge me with robbery. I deny everything, but all I could think of was that the next few years would be in prison. I had only spent 5 days in jail previously for a DUI to this event. When they booked me finally they told me I could make one phone call. The only number I knew was my mother's. It's been the same since I was a kid. I turned the call down. I was too embarrassed. A few days later I had to go to medical for a physical. The nurse asks if anyone knows I'm in jail. I don't know why I told her, but I mentioned that I chickened out of calling my mom. She points to a phone in the office and tells her I can call her now. I just remember the phone ringing and hoping to God she wasn't home. But she was. I expected her to disown me, but she just seemed more concerned about my safety and if I needed anything. She said she would be proud of me no matter what I did. The next day the jail tells me I have a visitor. I walk in and there is my mom. She starts crying and just smiles. She tells me that she's happy to see me and that she put $100 on my books so I can buy some supplies because she knows no one else would do it for me. My mother visited me once a month for 2 years. I received cards weekly, and even when I told her to stop sending money I would get a random $50. I guess the point is she never gave up on me. My mother and I talk all the time, more than before. I still get cards about once a month with a note inside reminding me how proud she is of me. Dude, made me cry. I love your mom. I used to work in forensic psychiatry with adults who had been declared not criminally responsible for a crime. Many of them had murdered someone, often a family member. Not all of their parents visited, but a surprisingly high number did. When you murder your stepfather and your mom still visits you in hospital, that says to me that parents will forgive dang near anything. To be fair, it's probably easier to stomach their kid killing someone because they're nuts as opposed to doing it in cold blood. My sister escaped a controlling abusive marriage when I was 12. She had nothing but her 6-month-old son when she moved back into my parents' home. I spent the next 15 years very active in raising that child, was basically another parent. When he was a teenager, he helped his father blindside my sister with a lawsuit suing for custody. Her ex tried this every other year or so, just to haul her into court and force her to have to deal with him, but they never went anywhere before this. He was old enough that his wishes would be considered and she didn't have the dollar sign to fight. Keep in mind that my nephew had never made any mention of wanting to live with his dad. So, that little crap sat in court and spewed out the most hurtful lies about my sister. She was a single mom and had her share of problems, but she worked her butt off and the whole family chipped in to make sure his life was the best we could all provide. After hearing that kid tell a judge about my sister parading men through the house and leaving him alone for days while she was out whoring, I saw my sister completely give up on her son. Now he's in his 20s and lives in his dad's basement. I understand that he is another victim of his father's psycho control, but when he said those things about my sister and I saw her heart break like that, I was done too. This crap makes me so sad. For your sister and your family, I want to cook you guys dinner. When I was a kid I was playing outside and took a rock from the driveway and carved "I love you mom" in huge letters across the side of my mom's brand new Camaro. She cried to her dad because she didn't know what she should do. How could she punish me for saying I love her? My mom usually explodes when she wants to, but this one time she had to keep it all in. She still says she wants to beat my butt because of that. Finally one that I can laugh about. The rest of these are killing me. I'm not a parent, but I know my mom will never forgive my sister. When my grandmother died she left each one of us have a wedding set. My sister being the oldest chose my grandmother's, and I got my great grandmother's, which was a 2.5 CT diamond, hers was 1 CT. Anyways, my sister brought some friends over and raided my parents' house. She collects insurance payments so she has cash. It was hidden in my room, so they went through everything. She pawned her wedding set and stole mine along with a ring that was my grandfather's and my tennis bracelet my father gave to my mother on their wedding day. Mom gave it to me when I got engaged. The pendant meant the world to my mom as my grandmother used to tell stories of her mother to my mother when she was younger. My mom and grandmother were very close and a lot of my mom's jewelry was my grandmother's. My sister laughed about it. She didn't care and still doesn't. She's also called the police on my dad for hitting her and threatening her with a gun and also for slapping around her son. None of that being true. She's a B. She's not only a B, she's a criminal. You could have actually had her arrested for theft if you wanted. I'm really sorry you're related to such a terrible human being. I would be devastated if someone stole such sentimental items and then had the balls to laugh about it. As the child, I know she'll never forgive me for choosing my dad over her. She's diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, aka psychopath, and it became unbearable to live with her to the point where I wanted to kill myself. She knows this all, but doesn't accept it. She'd rather have a dead, loyal son than a living son that betrayed her. This just scares me. No matter how hard you try, how much you love your child, the values you try to teach them, some kids come out rotten and there is nothing you can do about it. Not a parent, but my mom told me she would never forgive me for selling a coin collection we worked on together when I was younger. I was in the middle of a drug addiction and would have sold anything for money. I feel terrible about it still. Dang. I hope you kicked your drug addiction and things are better between your mum. Well, this will be an interesting one. For the record, I am the son in question. I remember the day when I told my mother that my 17-year-old girlfriend was pregnant. Something changed in my mother and it definitely was not for the better. I knew I had fricked up but didn't truly understand the struggle like my mother did. You see, my mother had me when she was 17 also. She had scholarships to go to art school and potentially make something of herself. She ended up taking care of me instead. I remember my mother looking at me and saying, "You are stupid if you choose to take care of that child." We got into a fight over it. I felt that since I was the dumbass that got my girlfriend knocked up, I should be the one to take care of it. I had computer repair skills and a knack for working hard. Finding work wouldn't be that hard, would it? Fast forward a few years and I can understand just exactly what she meant. Please note, I do love my children every single day and wouldn't trade them for anything. I spent those years watching as all my friends grow further away from me. Most got distant and didn't want to talk to a guy who had 2 jobs and a kid. I was a buzzkill for most of them. I struggled and pushed through everything that I had to take care of her. I honestly wasn't sure if I was going to make it for a while. 2 jobs making minimum wage isn't enough to afford daycare and a 1-bedroom apartment here in Iowa. I feel I lost a portion of my sanity through those times. I spent most of it wondering what life would be like if I gave her up for adoption and had done what my mother suggested. Would I be happier? I would have graduated and have a job making significantly more money than I do now. I did eventually prosper, but my mother and I have never been the same. She lost custody of me when she was younger because she couldn't keep up. She was definitely proud of me when I received my degree and got a real job. It took 6 years to do what would have taken 2. I still did it though. My mother was never going to forgive me for putting myself through exactly what she went through. I proved her wrong nonetheless. Just because you are destined to fail doesn't mean you will. I have a second beautiful daughter and a wonderful girlfriend whom I plan on marrying next year. Not my child, but this is about my younger brother. He's an alcoholic and has been for the past 15 years. He's only 32. Anyways, when he drinks he's a completely different person. I'm not talking about a sloppy drunk, but more like a possessed demon, filled with absolute hate. He never finished high school and barely got his GED. Hasn't worked in the past few years. Our mom supports him financially. Car paid for, apartment paid for, spending money provided to him. Basically, she's an enabler and he's a manipulator. His drinking is so out of control. I've had to cut him out of my life. It's sad, because he has a nephew who constantly asks for him and I just have to tell my son Uncle Drunk has moved far away. My brother has never made an honest attempt at sobering up. In fact, he's full of excuses. I can't have that in my life for my family's life anymore, and for that reason I've completely cut all ties with him. I can never forgive him for putting alcohol ahead of family. Uncle Drunk. I, too, have a drunkle Richard. My best friend was disowned by his parents for coming out as transgender. I'm not a parent, but I think the only thing that would cause me to cut my kids off like that would be a serious crime like murder. Right there with you. Whatever makes you happy, do it. I'm pretty sure my mother has not forgiven my 41-year-old brother for something that happened when he was 4. Allowed 13 seconds to himself in the bathroom, he managed to park her off the toilet to snag a bottle of Flintstones vitamins from a very high shelf and quickly gobble the entire contents. The Flintstones vitamins had already become a bone of serious contention between my mom and brother. Other parents will be familiar with the Rain Man-like fixation kids can have to stuff they like, as well as their complete inability to grasp the concept of moderation. As a parent, they push you to points where you regret ever introducing them to any external stimuli in the world because you find yourself stuck in these Groundhog Day loops that eat your soul but seemingly have no impact on their spaz-savant chimp minds. So, my brother's dream of unfettered Flintstones consumption comes true, and my mom, worried for him but also kind of seething at his idiotic victory in the Flintstones battle of there can be only one eaten per day, takes him to the emergency room. My brother ended up being fine. Skip to a few days later, Child Protective Services shows up for a surprise home visit. I suppose to determine if there was some kind of Munchausen by Flintstones thing going on with my mom. The confusion and anxiety response in my mom quickly transitioned to self-righteous humiliation. My mom being martyred is as scary as when other people turn into screaming lunatics. She's someone who genuinely, if sometimes unnecessarily, self-sacrifices quite a bit for her family, especially her children. Pretty sure she willed CPS out of the house through the sheer power of her mom guilt mind bullets. I still sometimes egg her on to tell the story just cause of how worked up she gets at my brother. Lord, how he pestered me about those Flintstone vitamins. Every day with those dagum Flintstone vitamins. And to a lesser extent the CPS folks with the haughty tone and questioning eyebrows. A Highlander reference and Munchausen by Flintstones. That was great. My eldest stepson, then 15 years old, stole my car in the middle of the night while drunk and took his friends joyriding. They wrote the car off. I have no idea how they managed it and dumped it before running off. My eldest was spotted and the police caught him. They brought him home to us at 0630 on the morning of my birthday to give us the news. I found the car in the middle of a housing estate, with several dents and scrapes on the bodywork, no brakes left, no clutch, half the gearbox casing missing and 2 flat tires. The engine still ran, but only just. Volkswagen. Luckily, no one was injured during this night of madness. I had just finished paying the loan for the car. It took 4 years of hard work to do that. I threw him out. This was the final straw in a long list of wild behavior over the previous 3 years. I couldn't take any more. His mother didn't agree with my handling of the situation and a year later we split up over it. I won't be going down that road again. I'm not a parent, but I did something that my mother will never forgive me for. Before I begin, you need to know some information about my mom. My mom is Catholic. She's been going to church every Sunday since she was 5. She believes that a man and a woman shouldn't have sex until after marriage. Me and my high school girlfriend were hanging out after school at my house as usual. Things started getting hot and heavy and we started making out. Clothes were coming off and at the time I finally thought I was going to lose my virginity. I had been with this girl for 3 years and I had never gotten a BJ or had sex with her. I had seen her naked and fondled her breasts, but that's as far as we had gone. Mid makeout my girlfriend just stops and asks me if I wanted a BJ. Obviously I said yes. I was finally getting my dong sucked and it felt great. I was loving every moment of it until my mom walked in. Instead of knocking on my room door like she usually did before entering, she just opened the door. I don't know what a mother's reaction should be in this type of situation, but she started yelling at my girlfriend. When I say yelling, I mean I heard her say words that I never heard her say before. She called my girlfriend a W and said that God would dang us both to heck for our act of sin. My girlfriend at this point is in tears and she's scrambling to get on her clothes and pretty sure she left my house without her bra because she was in such a panic. My mom didn't speak to me for a month after that. She didn't ask me how my day was at school. She didn't speak to me during dinner and she didn't even ask me to go to church on Sunday with her anymore. She used to go every Sunday but I always said no. That's the angriest I have ever seen my mom and we have never spoken about it. When she finally did talk to me, she said if I wanted her to ever speak with me again that I had to go to confession and confess my sins. I told her I would go, but I ended up going to a Denny's and ordering their lumberjack Grand Slam instead. She thinks I went to confession though. Also, every time my girlfriend came over after the incident, my mom would leave the house. I don't know where she went, but she couldn't be in the same vicinity as her. Worst part of it all was my girlfriend didn't attempt to give me another BJ for a year because she was so scared of my mother walking in on us. TLDR. My mom walked in on my girlfriend giving me my first BJ, told me that I was going to heck for my sins, and we have never spoken about it since. This one's about my sister, not my kid, but it's something that I'm not sure my mother's ever forgiven her for. My sister was never the perfect daughter. She generally did poorly in school, got into fights, joined a gang, a pretty tame one, though, and did some soft drugs, mostly weed and X. She's snuck boyfriends over to the house and had sex with them in my room, as well as my brother's room. She's stolen money from my younger brother, 9 years difference between my sister and brother, and run away from home. Despite all that, I still love her. But the one thing I can never forgive her for is when she abandoned her daughter. She and her husband had just split up, and were in the middle of a divorce. She was cheating on him with a kid from another state. Seriously, the guy was a kid. Something like a 12-year difference between him and her. Her husband found out and hit her. Pretty nasty stuff all around. My sister moved into my parents' place with her daughter. A couple weeks later, my sister and my mom get into a major fight, and my sister storms out and drives to her boyfriend's place. While she's packing her bags, my niece is grabbing at her, screaming, "Don't leave me, mommy," crying and apologizing, begging her not to go, begging her not to leave her alone. My niece keeps crying, "I love you, mommy, I want to stay with you." My sister shakes her off and just leaves. Eventually, she came back in order to get partial custody, but those cries will haunt me forever. Even if both my parents and her daughter have forgiven her, I never will. Son took my 74 mint condition Stratocaster, and by mint, I mean not a single solitary flaw, apart while experimenting with LSD and lost most of the pieces. I found it months after he did it. Mind you, I didn't check up on him much because he was a straight A student who did everything he was ever told, never spoke back, never really did anything wrong. Had no idea he was getting high or experimenting with anything. Found the guitar wrapped in a blanket under his bed. Everything was missing except the neck and the body. I cried. My first nice guitar. I quit playing it 20 years ago because it was actually going up in value. I didn't speak to him for a month. He was 16. I felt so violated and couldn't do anything about it. He had no clue where the parts were. On the bright side, the body and neck are the most valuable parts of that guitar. The rest of the hardware can be replaced. I wouldn't be too concerned about its value though. 70s Strats aren't worth much more than brand new made in America Strats. After reading some of these responses, my answer seems so trivial, but will share it anyway. I won't forgive my daughter for not wearing her retainer after her braces came off. She had beautiful teeth afterwards, but over time they have shifted. I can see that. Orthodontics are stupid expensive. Kids don't understand the importance until they are older either. My daughter turned 14 this year, got her license and all. She wanted a car real bad, of course, and I wasn't going to get one, but we just happened to stumble on a decent vehicle for a ridiculous price. Heck, just buying the thing for an extra vehicle was a no-brainer. We planned on giving it to her for Christmas this year. Big bow, all that jazz. However, she's been a snoopy crat lately and one day decides to go through the mail, finds the title the owner mailed us, and receipt for storage. Yes, I am getting a car. That was a month ago. Still pee off. I'm not mad that she found out about whatever Christmas present she was getting. I'm mad cause this is just one of those landmark gifts. I was getting really excited about seeing the look on her face. Pictures, all that. Might sound stupid, but that was going to be my Christmas present to myself. In a way, she ruined my Christmas morning 2 months ahead of schedule. Not my child, but my aunt. So from my grandparents' perspective, it's their child. My grandfather had brought back some spoils of war from Japan at the end of World War II. He was stationed there right around the surrender. He got hold of a flag and some samurai swords and a few other smaller items. They were likely worth a good amount now, but they were more sentimental in value to my grandfather, uncle and mother. My aunt, in her 30s at the time, split up with her latest boyfriend and moved in with my grandparents with her small children because she was too lazy to work. Shortly after that, all of the stuff disappeared. She never admitted to taking them, but seeing as there were lots of other valuables, it's unlikely that someone broke in or anything. She was the only one that would have had access to them during that time, so she's the only one who could have taken them. It's possible she had a guest that took them, but still she's responsible even then. It would have been hard for someone to take something like swords in the wall mount without noticing. My grandparents never forgave her until the day they died. I don't think my mom will ever forgive me for getting married and keeping it a secret from my entire family for 9 months. No, I wasn't pregnant, just a coincidence. Holy dang, I have Asian parents. I would be booted from the family if I did this. My mother always forgave my sister. My mom passed away in June, and after some more shenanigans my sister is finally cut out of the family for good. Some of the things she did: told administrators at her school that my parents forced her to smoke pot. On another occasion told her school administrators that my parents locked her in the closet and wouldn't feed her. Ran away from home at 17 and told the person she was living with that my mom and dad abused her in some awful ways. When my mom went to go talk to her after finding out where she was, the person she lived with took a knife to my mom's throat and threatened her life trying to protect my sister. Came back, ran away from home again to live next door with a creepy older guy and her girlfriend and do drugs openly to pee off my family. Stole $2,500 from my grandma and $3,000 from my great aunt. My mom got sick, cancer, and my sister and her new girlfriend came to live with my parents. My parents couldn't make bills and my mom needed someone to take care of her during the day, so it worked out with my sister and girlfriend paying 1/3 of bills and my parents paying 2/3. My mother passed away and then my sister stole my mom's wedding ring that was left to me to have when I married. Took a bat and destroyed all of my dad's things. Didn't pay their part of the bills. Took my dad's money that he paid them to take care of the bills. Stole $500 out of my dad's bank account. Created an AT&T account in my mom's name post-mortem and never paid for it. Left my dad in the lurch and moved away. And the real kicker that finally broke the camel's back was, had my dad arrested for indecency with a child. Got my 11-year-old nephew to exaggerate saying that my dad exposed himself to him, when in reality my nephew is weird and likes to try to burst in on people and see them naked so he can say I saw you naked, hahaha. The charges were dropped last month. I only hate one person, well two, my sister and her girlfriend, and I will never ever forgive them. This stuff is so scary for me to read. I feel like I was extremely close to turning out like some of the kids mentioned. If my parents didn't raise me as delicately as they did during a phase when I was extremely narcissistic and had not yet developed empathy, I have no doubt that I would have done some terrible things. Strangely enough, because of how much I despise the way I was before, I feel like I have become even more conscious of others' feelings than many of the people around me. I also can't help but feel some of the kids in this thread could have turned into some really kind people if not for some unfortunate environmental factors. What is something you did as a kid that heavily impacted your parents, but you didn't know until later in life? I used to always get on my mom's case because we always had to stop often for her to go to the bathroom. One day my dad pulled me aside and told me that I apparently had caused her some bladder damage when I was being born in the womb, and that's why she goes to the bathroom so often. I no longer comment on her bathroom activities. Definitely a known impact, but it still works enough. My dad had been asking me for years to choose whether I loved my mom or dad more and said I should live with whoever I liked best. He detested the 50/50 custody arrangement he had with my mom and constantly pressured me to pick one home or the other. Full stop. After 14 years of mumbling "I love you both, I can't pick," I finally just blurted out, "Mom, I want to live with mom." And so it was that he dropped me off at her house with my cat and all my belongings while she was at work, said "I can't believe I raised such a selfish kid" out the car window, and drove off. A week before my birthday, a little over a year later, my mom's got full custody and I'm working out a lot of issues I didn't know I had with the help of my counselor. Hopefully life will stay better from now on, and my dad can figure out the multitude of problems he has and deal with them now that he doesn't have the burden of a kid. Your dad sounds like an but. Here's to hoping he figures out his crap one day before it's too late. My dad was physically abusive towards my sister, so one day I couldn't handle it anymore and wrote a letter in broken words. I was only 9 or 10 years old, to my grandfather, and he told my dad that if he didn't stop, he wouldn't speak to him, and the beatings stopped. I wish it could be that simple in all abusive situations. Good on your grandpa. My dad died when I was 16. My mom cried every day, every single day, for months. One day I suggested to her that maybe she put herself out there again and sign up for an online dating site. She did. She ended up chatting, meeting, marrying a man from the other side of the USA. So, we moved from the South to the Pacific Northwest. He is the funniest, most awesome guy ever, and 10 years later they are still madly in love with each other. Not only did he teach her to play guitar, but he totally supported her taking risks in her job and is basically her fan club. She's now a VP of a company. I loved my dad very much, but I am glad I told her to stop mourning. P.S. Online dating can work out. I'm an butthole. I told my mom she couldn't come to my school because she was overweight. It makes me sad thinking about it today. Can only imagine how she felt back then. In 2nd grade I drew a Father's Day card depicting my dad as a bear, because he looks like one, I believe was my reasoning, surrounded by half-empty wine bottles. Everyone in my family thought it was hilarious. So I did almost exactly the same thing as you, but without the significant impact. I was expecting some other kind of significant impact. You surprised me by not actually having affected anyone's life. Growing up, my mother was a stay-at-home mom who mostly sold Avon products. My dad worked at a steel mill, long shifts, and he was literally never home between work and drinking heavily at the local bar. Anyway, she divorced his drunk butt when I was a toddler and they had joint custody. Since I never really knew who he was, I just knew the violent drunk side of him when he actually was home. I was terrified of him. He kicked us out of his house and we were homeless for a time, and then we lived with my grandmother. After a year of half-assed visitation on my father's part, my 5-year-old self blurted out in the car, "No, I wanna go home. You're not the mama," and started crying. He turned around, left me at home with my mom and never came back for another visitation, never called me, and never sent me a birthday card. Apparently, he had told my mother that I was a brat and couldn't deal with me, didn't want a kid, and I was her problem now. I also didn't get to see my half-brother, dad's kid, after that point. And that's how you get rid of a father. I didn't see him again until I accidentally ran into him when I was a teenager. I never really asked what happened until recently, and my mom just said it's in the past now. Also, during a session with a school guidance counselor about the divorce, I drew a funny picture of my dad peeing naked because I accidentally walked in on him once when I was younger and thought dongs were hilarious from then after. My mother got a phone call about her abused daughter and a bunch of people thought he had physically shamed me. He never did. They asked me if he had touched me and I could tell I was in serious crap. But my mother tried to get me to confess to it multiple times in order to get my father in legal trouble. I never did, but for a month or two everyone I came into contact with was very concerned about me and my family life. I saw the guidance counselor after lunch on a daily basis. Your mother trying to get you to confess to that horrifies me. Imagine if you somehow wound up thinking that it had happened, or being confused about it, or whatever. That kind of thing could really frick you up. My parents wouldn't let my grandmother around me when I was born until she quit smoking. She was a smoker for 25 years and quit as soon as she heard that news. My parents told the same thing to my grandmother, but, well, she was so sad that my parents finally didn't care about her smoking. She kept smoking for 25 more years, 3-pack a day, and died around 80, in her sleep. My dad used to chew tobacco. Once at a restaurant I put a sugar packet in my mouth like daddy. My dad quit that, and even when he'd fall back into the tobacco habit, he only smoked in hiding. The image of a 5-year-old with a sugar packet haunted him for the rest of his days. We got the smoking is bad lecture when I was in 1st or 2nd grade, and I came home and told my parents, both chain smokers, I love you very much, and I don't want you to die from smoking cigarettes. I want you to be around forever. My dad told me when I was a teenager that me saying that broke his heart and that he quit smoking that day. I asked my mom later if she remembered me saying that to her. Her response, yeah, but you were just a dumb kid. What do you know? And then she was diagnosed with cancer a few years ago. And that about sums up my relationships with my mom and dad. My dad works in construction and after work would have a beer or two every day. I was around 6 or 7 and was learning how drugs are bad for you and told him that when he died we would place beer cans around his grave instead of a headstone. He stopped drinking for the next 15 years until my sisters both started dating. As a father of beautiful daughters, I understand. When I was little my dad was in the Navy and would spend months away at sea. Once when I was 2 years old he came back from being gone for 4 months and I didn't remember him at all. Even though apparently he had a promising future in nuclear naval research development, he stepped down and got a normal job so he could be with my mom and I and actually see his daughter grow up. I can tell he still misses it in some ways. Your father sounds like a stand-up guy, sacrificing something that makes him happy for the betterment of his family. Give him a high five for me. Ah, what a sweet story. When I was 10, my mother gave my sister and I the choice to either live in a hotel or go back to her abusive husband. We chose the husband because we didn't want the other kids making fun of us. You can imagine what impact that choice had. I'm sorry mom. I wish you hadn't cared about our opinions so much. I used to be unable to say I love you. It was some kind of weird mental block that probably had something to do with anxiety. I still have a lot of anxiety problems. I just couldn't get the words out. So my mom would always tell me she loved me and I wouldn't be able to say it back. Sometimes she would ask me if I loved her and I wouldn't even be able to nod. One time she told me that she actually cried herself to sleep because of this, which absolutely killed me. Mine is less something I did, and more how someone felt about me. I had an aunt who died before I was born. She was in her 20s, fell asleep smoking in bed, and died in the ensuing house fire. I was vaguely aware of Aunt Peggy throughout my childhood. My grandparents kept pictures of her up with the rest of the family portraits, and family members would always remark about how Peggy would have loved a certain thing. Now, my grandparents were extremely doting. They were true products of the Depression. Frugal, sensible people who valued love and togetherness more than possessions. I never doubted that they loved me and my sisters. A brief example, my grandpa's birthday was the 16th of February, and I was born on the 17th of February. Every single year at our joint family birthday party, he would tell me that I was the best birthday present he ever got. I've never felt more special. Flash forward to my 20th birthday. I find out in the early hours that my grandpa has passed away. I am inconsolable for the next week or so. My uncle asks me to say something at the funeral, and I agree. I told the birthday story again, choking back tears the entire time. Then my uncle gets up to give his eulogy. He starts telling the story about my aunt's death. My oldest sister was only 1 or 2 at the time, and my mom got pregnant again a couple of years later. Then had my second oldest sister, another girl. Then she gets pregnant again, and has another girl, pregnant a 4th time. My mom and dad are crossing their fingers extra hard, hoping that this one me will be a boy. At this point in the eulogy my uncle starts to smile. He looks at my parents and apologizes, telling them that he's about to reveal a huge family secret. He says that before my parents knew they were having a 4th daughter, my grandpa pulled him aside and said, "Tom, I already know it's going to be another girl." My uncle asks how grandpa says, "Peggy was taken from us far too early, and it was unfair, but the universe is making up for it." When I was born, my grandpa pulled my uncle aside at the hospital, winked and said, "I told you, our entire lives, my sisters and I never had any idea how much we truly meant to my grandparents." I had the worst fear of the cuties, so much so that I began telling my parents that I would much rather marry another guy. "I'm straight as an arrow and you can't make this crap up." I paraded around the house proclaiming myself gay. Little did I know, my parents were majorly conservative and fundamentalist Christians, and once they experienced love for a gay child, they did the 180 and became major supporters of gay rights. TLDR. Cooties made my conservative parents think I was gay, made them love gay people. This is absolutely classic. A tiny unknowing civil rights activist. My mom cheated on my father when I was a little kid. I don't know why, but she took me over to his house one night when she stayed over with her new boyfriend. I played with his kid that was my age and watched Free Willy. Don't know why I remember that. A few weeks later my dad sat me on our kitchen counter and plainly asked if mommy had another boyfriend besides daddy. I told him yes, and even proudly admitted that I knew where he lived because it was right by grandma's house. We drove out there during the day while my mom was at work. When we pulled up to the driveway, my mom's car was there. She had been skipping out on her job to cheat on my dad. My dad told us to get out of the car, honked the car horn, and drove off. My sisters and I jumped out. My mom saw us and realized what deep crap she was in. When we got back to our house, it was surrounded by cops. My dad was trying to kill himself. The cops talked him out of it, but the next week was a downward spiral and the beginnings of my parents' separation. I didn't realize until I was older that the information I told my dad began the end of my parents' marriage. I know they would have separated either way because my mom was being unfaithful, but I think that it was a lot rougher than it needed to be because of what I did said. TLDR. Told my dad that my mom was cheating on him. Took him to her boyfriend's house and then my dad threatened to kill himself. The information I gave my dad started my parents' divorce. Absolutely and unequivocally not your fault. Nothing about that situation was your fault. The divorce wasn't because you said it. It was because your mom did it. My father never wore a seatbelt, ever. When he was young and when he was getting his license people didn't wear them, and even though it was 1999 in this story he still wasn't wearing one, and this terrified 4-year-old me. I thought every time he drove he was for sure going to die. So every day when he'd get in the car with me to drive me to preschool I'd say "Buckle your seatbelt daddy" repeatedly until he became so annoyed by my nagging that he did it. This went on every morning for months. My father normally came home from work at 9 o'clock every night, 9:30 if he was really late. Until the 11th of January, 2000 it was 11:45 and daddy wasn't home yet. An officer came to the door and said there had been an accident and my mother needed to go with him to the hospital. My dad had been in a 50-mile-per-hour head-on collision, but he was alive. He sustained back and neck injuries, but he'll come home soon and make a full recovery. And you know why? Because he didn't sail through the windshield upon impact. He wore his seatbelt, without me even having to tell him to, but he thinks I did. He told me years later that when he got in his car to come home that night, He was about to leave and he swears he heard my voice say buckle your seatbelt daddy, and that's why he chose to wear it, and that's why he's still here with my family being the best dad a girl could ever hope for. TLDR. Annoyed my dad to the point of having auditory illusions that saved his life. I was 18 in final year of high school and my mother was suffering from a bout of bad dreams. She would realize it is a bad dream but was unable to wake up. She would try and scream but as dreams work, only soft little yelps would come out. So one morning around 2 AM I go for a pee and I hear little mule's yelps coming from my folks' bedroom down the hall. So I drag my sleepy butt over there, peek my head in and ask my mom if she is okay. She stops making the noises and responds that she is fine. Years later my dad tells me that he wasn't allowed to touch my mom again until I moved out of the house 3 years later. TLDR. I dong blocked my dad for 3 years. I come from an immigrant family and both my parents had to work hard after the first several years that we moved here. My parents were out of the house a lot and needed a babysitter for my younger brother. He's 6 years younger so we have a pretty big age gap. So basically I played babysitter from ages 13-17. When I got to being a freshman in high school, I lost some of my really good friends from middle school due to stupid drama that happened. Anyways, I wanted to make new friends at this new school so I asked my parents if I could join soccer. My dad told me I couldn't because my brother needed to have someone to take care of him after school. I cried a lot that night, but my parents convinced me that I was really helping them out, and I eventually understood. Fast forward, when my brother got to middle school, he started playing soccer and getting involved with local park district teams and traveling teams. During his second season, a little girls team would play in a field nearby, and my dad always had tears in his eyes from remembering how much it hurt me that I couldn't play. When my sister and I were little kids, ages 3-10, my grandmother regularly took care of us during the summertime. Every week, she'd drive 2 hours from San Diego to Los Angeles to watch us for about 3 or 4 days. She'd take us to Malibu to go to the beach and go shopping. I know that sounds incredibly pretentious, but in a nutshell, she spoiled us rotten. I mean rotten. She eventually moved in with my mother and did most of the cleaning, cooking, and babysitting. She spent most of her retirement buying us gifts and expensive outings. One day, she made some playful comment along the lines of "I'm not your servant." I said "Yes you are" because I was so accustomed to her waiting on me hand and foot. She looked completely heartbroken and, a few days later, decided to move out. My younger sister, being about 6 years old, felt completely betrayed that her grandmother had abandoned her. Later in the year, my grandmother came for a surprise visit when I wasn't home. My sister greeted her with some insanely snarky comment like, "Well, where have you been?" and then gave her the cold shoulder for the rest of the day. None of my family members have seen or heard from my grandmother since this event. This was 2005. My mother hired a private investigator to search for her, but they've largely been unsuccessful. I later learned that she suffers from an extreme anxiety disorder. TLDR. My sister and I took my grandmother completely for granted and caused her imminent disappearance. My parents held the reins pretty tight during my childhood, but the weird thing is I never had a problem with their authority and I have no memory of any particular punishment being doled out. So once I jokingly asked my mom how she accomplished this without ever hitting me and her comment was "Oh, we used to hit you," and then a little snort laugh. Wanting to follow up on this, I asked my dad about it and he told me the story of the last time anyone got hit as punishment. Apparently I was around 4-5 years old and my brother was 2-3 and being about as terribly annoying as a toddler can be. He was doing something particularly bad one day and just drove my dad nuts. So my dad calmly tells him to stop, then, when he continues, warns him that he's going to have to spank him if this continues. The noise and threatening continue in a cycle until my dad is at the end of his patience and approaches my brother to follow through on his word and dole out some punishment. At this point I walk up and blurt out he's not going to stop doing that even if you spank him. But if you really want to hit somebody you can hit me instead since he made you so mad. Apparently my dad took a long walk after that one and decided that was it on corporal punishment. My laziness saved my mom's life. I really didn't like high school very much, so I'd stay home a lot. One day I begged to stay home and my mom and I fought so much. for an hour even, but she eventually let up. I felt horrible and wanted to be close to her, so I decided to sleep in her bedroom. It turns out, as my sister was leaving for work and for no reason would she have checked on my mom would have died if I hadn't went to sleep in her room. She is a wood carver. She uses blocks of wood and carves portraits of animals out of them and sprays her wood with this finishing that adds an extra coat of shine. But it can be toxic if in a contained room. It turns out she inhaled too much and immediately passed out, unable to breathe. I woke up to her choking and was able to call 911. She lived. When I was 6, I was looking through my mom's stuff when I found a really nice ring. I decided to wear it to school that day because it made me feel grown up. Needless to say, I lost it in the playground. Mom never mentioned it and no one ever found out, so I figured I was in the clear. 11 years later, I'm talking to my grandmother about my parents and she brings up the reason why they never married. My dad had proposed when mom was pregnant, and she refused but they stayed together as a common law couple anyway. Then, when I was 6, he proposed again. She lost the engagement ring and took it as a sign that they shouldn't be married. They separated when I was 10. 3 guesses as to which ring I had worn to school that day. I still feel like absolute crap about it and I've never told anyone. Being responsible. My parents were never strict at all, and as long as my siblings and I were home for dinner, we could do whatever we wanted. Now that I'm older, they always say how easy it was to raise 4 kids. I wanted to play volleyball in middle school or high school. I was never good enough to make the team at school. I begged my parents to put me in club volleyball, which costs around $2,000 per season, so I could still play competitively. My dad was laid off from his job and as the sole earner in the family, he found a way to put up the money for 4 years to let me play. I was a spoiled brat back then and wish I had realized it earlier. My mom and dad divorced when I was little, around 8. And at about 13 I asked my mom, why can't you be like the other moms? She worked 2 jobs, didn't get any help from my dad, and I never saw her. I wondered all throughout my teens why my mom never talked to me or cared about me. When I was 19 she finally told me why, and that's when she finally started getting help for her bipolar. She thought I meant why aren't you sane like them, not why aren't you remarried by now kinda deal. We became closer, and well, I guess it turned into a happier story than I thought it would be. Yay. When I lost my virginity, my girlfriend bled a lot and took the blanket we were on from a couch, not my bed, and tried to wash it before anyone found it. My dad found it and asked me about it. Of course I denied any knowledge of the semen blood frick sweat stained blanket. Flash forward a few years and my parents are divorced. Flash forward a few more years and my dad finally tells me the catalyst to their divorce. He found a blanket that someone had fricked on, and since it wasn't mine or his, it had to be hers. Still haven't told anyone. TL. DNRI caused my parents' divorce. For real. Well, I have a few concerning my father. When I was little, he was gone so much that I started calling my best friend's father daddy. He still spends every second of free time with my sister and I. He also used to chew obscene amounts of tobacco. He was rotting his teeth out. But when I was 4, I told him, no more kisses till you stop chewing the black stuff. That was more than a decade ago, and he hasn't relapsed on it in 6 years. When my older brother moved in with us, he took up so much of my mom's time that I walked up to her and asked when she was going to love me again. I was 6. She still has nightmares about it. What is the most extreme example of helicopter parenting that you have ever witnessed? In my first college course there was a 16-year-old in my class and their parents sat through the entire lecture next to them. The professor expressed his concern about her taking up a seat for a student and the mom immediately snapped at him about how she was paying his salary by enrolling her kid there and she deserved respect. Poor kid made no friends in that class. The mom immediately snapped at him about how she was paying his salary by enrolling her kid there and she deserved respect. Except, she's disruptive for the other 20 to 60 students who also paid for the course. My brother had it pretty bad. He ended up being locked in his room for the summer because he went to his high school grad party without permission. He could leave for food or to use the bathroom. He decided frick it and went to college far away. He's doing extremely well for himself now. He's in a fraternity and interning as an actuary. When I was a kid I wasn't allowed to talk on the phone without my mom or grandmother listening in from another phone in the house. If I wanted to send a personal letter they had to read it before it went in the mail. And of course they opened anything that came addressed to me. I also had to write in a diary daily which they were allowed to read. Schoolwork I had to let one of them read before I turned it in, and then when it was graded, show them the comments the teacher had made. My mom would even go through my trash, and if she found something, a note from a friend, a phone number jotted down on a noticeard, etc., she would iron out the paper and make me explain it. For a while, I wasn't allowed any toys that weren't educational. When I was 5 my grandpa bought me a transformer, and before I was allowed to play with it he had to make a 2-hour defense to my grandma that the transformer was not only a pretty accurate model of a real military jet, but also a puzzle, and having it would foster patriotism and an interest in technology and otherwise improve my mind. In the end I got to keep it. She didn't know it was from a TV show or it would have gone right in the trash. Going to see movies wasn't a matter of hey mom can I have money for a movie, I had to cut an ad for it and a review out of the paper, highlight the parts of the ad and review that made me interested in the film, and present these to an adult at dinner. The adults in the house would then debate the pros and cons of me seeing the movie, and sometimes I would be allowed to go supervised, of course. Jesus Christ, that sounds horrific. Till I was 18 years old, I wasn't allowed to listen to anything other than classical or country music. I wasn't allowed to wear baggy clothes. Think 1997 when baggy jeans were the thing to wear. And I wasn't allowed to wear any style of skater shoes, or any brand name shirts or any band merch. My mother would go through all my stuff when I was at work, snap CDs, cut up shirts and jeans into a load of pieces and throw them away, and replace them with her approved items. 5 days before I turned 18 my girlfriend at the time took me to do my driving test, and my mom cut it up when she heard me on the phone telling my friend that I had passed it. Flash forward to today, I'm 36, moved to England, got married, quite a severe case of misanthropy, no interest in having kids, I'm covered in tattoos, got a great job, and most importantly, an amazing wife who had a completely opposite upbringing but the same outview on everything as I do, also an awesome job. We told the family to mind their own business and got married in Vegas 6 years ago and will live happily ever after with our cats. My best friend in high school, and I kind of helped her dodge her father the best she could. So, like, I became the crazy, Satanist, lesbian heathen even though I was, like, none of those things. She wasn't allowed to talk to people not of their religion. She did anyway. She wasn't allowed to own fiction books. I hid them for her. They didn't want her drawing or writing because her imagination was dangerous. We had art parties. God forbid she go to college or get a job because where would they be without her? I smuggled her to a community college to put in an application. Unfortunately, she now lives with her parents still despite the fact she's bordering 28, never finished her degree, has never had a job, and spends most of her time babysitting. We've fallen out of touch because, well, I couldn't keep fighting for her forever. I still worry about her a lot, though. I'd contact her if there was a reliable way to do so. Friend of my sister's. Sister has kids, I don't. Mother flew a drone to follow her kids to their neighborhood park the first time they went alone. The real drone parenting. There was a mom who would come to middle school every day at lunch to touch up her daughter's ponytail. Like, she'd tighten it or smooth down flyaways. She'd come back if the girl had anything after school. She also punched a boy at the fall fling because his pumpkin won the pumpkin carving contest. His wasn't the greatest, but he was the most popular kid in school, and it was voted on by students, so obviously, the girl cried, like, huge heaving sobs, and the mom flipped out, running onto the dance floor, and found the boy who won and just started pummeling him for stealing the votes. Parents of a girl I went to school with got arrested because they parked in front her dorm and slept in their van. Then, they would walk with her to classes and sit in the back of the room. Some other students reported that there were people living in the van on campus, like, in the middle of campus, not on some public street, and when security investigated, the dad tried to throw a George Foreman grill at him. It was weird. Please tell me the woman in the first story got arrested. My parents tracked my phone. This even continued in college. read my texts, emails and social media, searched my room weekly and sometimes my body. They'd take my door often. I was a straight A student that never did anything wrong before they started that. Started acting out some and developed really bad anorexia because it was the only thing I had control over in my life. My dad was also abusive, but this was their helicopter side. Now I can't wait to move across the country next summer and be far away from them. To clarify, I am not sick anymore. My anorexia went away when I left the house and went to college. Back when I was in Boy Scouts, we had this really weird family in our troop. Let's call the kid Joe for reference. We held game movie nights once a year in the winter for everyone to come to. Joe's parents were homeschooling him and apparently didn't want him watching movies rated above PG-13, even though everyone including Joe was 14 or older, and disallowed him from playing any games rated above everyone. We ignored the parent because he was a real crap nugget and brought teen-rated games and PG-13 movies because we wanted it to be fun. The parents flipped crap and yelled at the parents who hosted it, saying that it was inappropriate. He eventually threatened to take us to court and requested that we never spoke to him again. I checked up on Joe last year, and apparently his parents never let him use the internet. This whole fiasco happened in 2008. They also prohibited him from getting his driver's license because they feared him getting into trouble. He was a decent kid though. Too bad his parents were batshit crazy. I hope they will be happy never having a grandchild, or the fact that the kid will never be able to hold a real job ever. Even if they keep him in a tight shell his whole life, eventually they will die and he will be unable to cope in the real world. I had this friend in middle school whose mom never let her do anything. Sometimes on Friday, our school had this fundraiser where you paid $2 to be allowed to wear a t-shirt instead of the usual polo shirt. On one of those days, my friend had woken up early to straighten her hair so she could look cute while wearing her t-shirt, but then her mom told her she could either have straight hair or wear a t-shirt. The fight that ensued led to her mom spraying her hair with water and not giving her money for the fundraiser. This other time, my friend arrived at school wearing her band polo and some orange sneakers, and told me that she got in a fight with her mom that day over the shoes. Her mom told her to change them, but my friend was about to miss the bus, so she logically said she had no time. Her mom then told her she was going to wear that same shirt every day as punishment for being disobedient. And true to her word, every afternoon my friend would get home, her mom would wash the band polo, and my friend would show up the next day wearing it again. She started wearing colorful jackets every day to hide it. That's more abuse than helicopter parenting. A job applicant came to interview for an open position. During the normal discussion and vetting, it started to look like this person wasn't very driven, proactive, or maybe even really qualified. This point was driven home when he asked how much longer the interview was going to last. We asked why. His response: "My dad drove me here and is waiting outside to take me home." This was for a professional position, requiring a 4-year degree that takes on average 5+ years to acquire, and some years experience working in the field. We dismissed the candidate. Afterward, it became clear that dad had likely authored the resume also. A friend of mine's parents were so obsessed with the fact that their kid should be saving money that they routinely confiscated every penny on his banking account onto a savings account. The poor guy worked every Wednesday and Saturday to get some money to do fun things with his friends. But when he went to pay, his card would get rejected, and it'd turn out his parents had moved every penny he'd worked hard for to a separate account he couldn't access. When he turned 18, he spoke with the bank and revoked his parents their access to any and all banking related to him. I have actually been sitting on this story until I found an Ask Reddit for it. So I worked as a lifeguard for 4 years, and during my final year lifeguarding I saw her, the helicopter mom of the year. Her kids was like 4 and actually a very good swimmer for his age. The mom wouldn't get in their pool, but she made very sure to stand at the edge giving him orders and micromanaging his actions as he played with other kids. She has been making the poor kid check in with her almost minutely, even though he was never really more than 10 feet from her as she followed him around. Well, after a while of this kid getting harassed by his mother, he's had it. This 4-year-old boy swims at 10 get back to his mother because she wanted to make sure he was alright, and tells her mom, "Shut up, you make me want to not be alive anymore." This was the funniest crap he's ever heard a child say, and it very well might never get topped. The mom started crying and put him on timeout so she could helicopter him more, but that little kid was G. What's sad is he felt that way because of her craziness. Girlfriend's father was terrible. In addition to being emotionally abusive, he demanded to know every detail of where she was going, who with, and when she would get there. He basically said she was a child who couldn't do anything on her own and needed him to whip her into shape because that's what his parents did to him. He was also a Bible thumper when it benefited him and his strict rules. My girlfriend got kicked out on her 18th birthday without so much as a call your mother to pick you up. She had 5 minutes to pack as much as she could in a trash bag and get out. I got a call at 12:30 at night from her and had to go pick her up. Years of abuse had taken a major toll on her. She had major self-esteem issues and body issues, and some health issues that the doctor said were stress related. She had major trust issues with men because of her father-approved boyfriends who would fake love until they slept with her, then leave her. I was the first guy she ever really trusted and the first she told any of this to. She lives with her mom now and is doing much better. She's even going to college now for social services because she doesn't want anyone else to suffer like she did. We're currently looking for a place together and I'll be proposing next September on our anniversary if everything keeps going like it has been. I'm excited. I know helicopter parenting is funny from afar, but my mom was a helicopter parent. She controlled who my friends were, what sports I played, and even the classes I took in high school. For anyone dealing with a helicopter parent, that requires absolute control, that praises you for your successes, much more than warranted, but punishes you for shortcomings, also more than warranted. Please cut them out of your life. A personality disorder develops because of this. It is most prevalent in males, but can also be in females. When you're a child and your primary caregiver causes your emotions to constantly go from love, warmth, and trust to guilt, hate, and worthlessness, which are all constantly present emotions with a helicopter parent, you don't develop emotional trust, which in my mind is the most important human aspect. When this happens to a child, a quite clever thought process takes place. If I can't feel, I can't get hurt. A child suppresses their emotions and chooses not to experience them. As someone who took this route, it doesn't give you happiness. It gives you nothing. I constantly experience emotions, but on the inside, I despise people for showing theirs, but I'm truly jealous instead. I can't hold relationships or friendships. I'm 21. It took me 4 years of my life to get to the root of my problem and it's going to take me even longer to get better. If you're someone who has experienced the unfortunate psychological abuse of helicopter parenting, remember, everything you learn, you can unlearn. It just takes more effort. Start reinforcing your behavior that you enjoy about yourself and stop focusing on the bad. Your parent focused on the bad and only what they considered to be good. It is your turn to live. Can confirm. Dead on the inside. Not exactly helicopter parenting, but would guilt trip me over the slightest of problems and take away toys, video games, time with friends, whatever I was into at the time. If I don't have an emotional attachment to something, they can't take it away from me. My college roommate, I lived with him junior and senior year, so from when he was 21-23, it was his first time living away from home, but not really, since he was from the same town that campus was in. Every week, at least once, up to 3 times per week, he'd go home for dinner because his mom made him. During this time she would grill him about homework and grades, as if he was still in high school or something, and ask why he wasn't going on any dates or bringing home any nice girls. She is why he wasn't bringing home any nice girls. We went on a baseball road trip once, and even though my car was much younger and had no issues, and like his troublesome car, she insisted that he couldn't go if it wasn't in his car. So since he was doing the driving, he couldn't text obviously, so he decided to give my number to his mother to give updates. We were driving back from Detroit to Buffalo, so we drove through Canada, so we had to turn off our phones. And when I turned my phone back on, I had a ton of messages asking me if her son was alright doing all the driving, especially in a foreign country, and she wanted to know why it took so long to cross the Canadian section of our drive. She wasn't even my mother, but she helicopter parented me. I was homeschooled from the 2nd grade to the 10th grade due to difficulties with crappy teachers. Wasn't allowed to wear tight-fitting clothes. Everything had to be a size or two too big because mom didn't want me profiling. I couldn't be at friends' houses or parties without my mother being there. Couldn't listen to anything other than gospel music and Disney songs. Yes, even well into my teens. Mom explicitly banned non-gospel music on Sundays, not even allowing me to have my iPod on the way to church. No physical ed. Mom bought some Christian girl talk book, but grounded me for a month when she caught me flipping through it without her consent. If I were going to hang out with a friend, mom had to know who would be there, where we were going, and what we were doing, even to the point of asking for people's numbers. She only really ever let me hang out alone with one person. Ironically, the one person was the one who helped me sneak around to hang out with other people. Wasn't allowed to watch movies above PG. Read watch anything with magic or witchcraft, aside from Disney movies because frick if I know. Or play video games outside of like Legend of Zelda. I also wasn't allowed to be on the internet half the time since we had dial-up. No fricking. I came home from college and mom about shat herself when she found my depot shot reminder that had fallen out of my purse. No pills or therapists. My parents let me see a therapist and start taking Prozac since I was 23 and they were legally unable to stop me, but they let me know just about every week how much they're not okay with it. I'm supposed to be praying the depression away, damn it. Inviting themselves to my therapy appointments, as in, calling me at 8 PM the night before, long after the office has closed, to tell me they're coming with me to my appointment, which also fricks up my therapist's schedule. Constantly berating me about my spending habits. I know I have a crappy handle on spending. I'm currently attempting to budget, and I do not need to drive down to the house 45 minutes out of my way to be lectured about it. Whenever they have some kind of beef with me, they won't tell me what it is. All I get is, "You need to come to the house tomorrow." I'm not in the mood to talk about it right now if I even as for so much as a preview of what's going on. After spamming the heck out of my phone with calls, I'm not allowed to be angry with them or anything. If I express any kind of objection, it's talking back or being a smart aleck. I speak in a very monotone voice when I'm around them, because I don't feel like being snapped at to watch my mouth if I offer any kind of inflection. Basically my life. I'm still moved out, but they still tend to act as if I'm still living with them. My sister is an RA, dorm supervisor at a university and was called by the parent of one of her residents because their room was too cold. I assume the resident was just complaining to her mom I'm always cold or something. But get it together people. I was a senior RA last year. I enjoyed dealing with parents. Your son daughter can talk to me, but I can't talk to you. Have a nice day. She wouldn't let her kid turn on Street Puss on his 3DS because apparently that's how child predators catch kids despite the fact that the online interaction is limited to receiving a bad 3D model and single censored sentence. Also she told my parents that they were idiots for letting me pursue a degree in language, which was pretty awkward considering my dad got his PhD in French. My ex-girlfriend. When we first started dating, her mom would call and text her every 15 minutes to see what we were doing. If she didn't answer immediately, she'd text me to see what we were doing. We went swimming once and she had to leave the pool every 10 minutes to text her mom. Her parents were almost inconsolably crying the week leading up to her 18th birthday. Her mom had told me she didn't plan on letting her move out until her late 20s, and when she did move out she'd have to call every day and visit her 5 times a week. My GF had been bullied severely in high school and her parents were more than happy to let her drop out so she could be at home more. When I encouraged her to get her GED and helped her study, her parents were upset because getting her GED meant she might be able to go to college and move out. She did pass her GED. Her parents cleaned up after her, made all her meals, and religiously tracked her money even after she turned 18. They made sure she couldn't do basic household tasks like laundry so that she couldn't move out. Once at my house we were watching a movie and neither had our phone on us. Her mom showed up at my house to check on us. They even monitored her food. She'd get her steak well done and I once had her try it medium rare to see if she liked it. She did, but her parents scolded her for it. I ended things with her because although I loved her I couldn't handle her parents and just couldn't ever see myself married to her in the future with parents like that. Parents coming to do their kids' laundry at college. The kid will be sitting in the lounge area and mommy will be hard at work in the laundry room. You are 19. Learn to wash your own socks. My university's subreddit had a future student's parent posting questions about the college, campus, and dorms, etc. The real student, coming to school next year, made a post calling the parent out for being a helicopter. Those usernames. Row. Parents of horrible children. Where did it all go wrong? My brother Dickweed's a drug addict and criminal. I know pretty much where it went wrong. At every turn, my mother would cover for him. If Dickweed missed school, it's okay. Mother'd go in and smooth it out. If he cut up a bunch of decorations, it's fine. It's fine. We'll pay officer. No need to charge us. When he stole a car and totaled it, she blamed everyone but him and got him a lawyer to convince them to drop the charges. Same deal with his first drug offense. Get him a lawyer. Convince the judge to give him probation for 2 years. I have seen her bail him out, talk him out, and connive him out of more legal trouble than anyone I have ever known. He is completely arrogant about his choices in life. If you challenge him, you're in butthole. Talking sense to him is impossible because in the echo chamber of his head, the only person who matters is himself. And why not? All through his life, hasn't his mother been there to shore him up and fish him out? My younger brother, 15, is going through this. Dad won't discipline him. He is always in trouble. No consequences ever. What should I do? I have 2 kids. The oldest, 8 years old female, is absolutely terrible. The youngest, 6 years old male, is amazing. I have no idea what happened. I've been a stay-at-home mom for both of them their entire lives. Last year, my daughter began acting out. It started with tantrums. It has now elevated to name-calling, hitting, and throwing. Her test scores in school are suffering this year, and I'm not sure she'll make it out of 2nd grade. Every day, I pick them up from school, we come home, and within minutes it starts. Something will trigger her, and I feel like there's nothing I can do. Sitting in timeout doesn't work. Today, she sat in timeout for 3 hours straight. This started out as a 10-minute punishment. I'm at my wit's end. I've taken toys away, privileges away, everything I can think of, and it's getting to the point where my son is suffering because of her. If she acts up, we don't go out. So to answer your question, I have no idea where it went wrong. I don't feel like my husband and I have raised the youngest any differently, and it wasn't always like this. I have horrible siblings, felons, drug addicts. I'm the only person in my family who has figured out that my mom is a big-time narcissist. My brothers were the classic bad kids in school and graduated to drugs and jail and alcoholism. I was somewhat the opposite as a kid behavior-wise, perfectionistic, and now I am just intractably codependent and subconsciously self-destructive. A narcissistic mother uses her children to feed her narcissism in all kinds of ways. The damage from this is permanent. I guess what I'm saying is that sometimes this crap is way more complicated than it looks in the grocery store. I have been longing to tell these stories on Reddit. I worked as an au pair, live-in nanny sort of deal, for a German family for about 10 months last year. The parents had to travel a lot for work, which I knew going into it, though I was told it was not that frequent or for that long. Biggest lie they told me. They have 3 children, a 17-year-old boy, a 15-year-old boy, and an 11-year-old girl. I basically did everything for these kids. I made their breakfasts, their school lunches, their dinners, did all their laundry, cleaned their rooms, made their beds, helped them with homework, hung out with them, everything, including the parents' cleaning and laundry, which I was not supposed to do. Not a big deal. I don't mind housework and I love cooking. But holy frick, the girl was the worst child I ever experienced in my life, and I had a frick ton of experience working with kids, especially kids from poor, rough backgrounds. This girl was incredibly spoiled by her father, like any little girl, and her mother was not usually around. One evening we were playing Rummikub and we all beat her, myself, her brothers, and her dad. She threw a freaking fit, literally flipped the table, screaming and sobbing, and when her older brother told her to calm down she freaking lunged at him, grabbed his leg, and bit him and tore off flesh. She freaking tore flesh from his calf. Then her father started yelling at her, so she bit him on the arm until he bled. He started screaming at her, at which point she started to sob, and then he comforted her, told her it was okay, and asked if she wanted ice cream. Ice cream? Nope. If she was my child, or I had authority at that moment, she'd be freaking done. Another time I was helping my host mother put away the Christmas decorations. The daughter was in a crappy mood as usual, and was sitting on the stairs to the basement. They live in a very beautiful modern home, and the stairs are made of concrete and steel. I am carrying a box of Christmas stuff. This demon child stretches out her leg, and trips me down the stairs. Luckily I caught myself before I fell, but if I had fallen I could have seriously been injured. The mother refused to believe that her daughter did that to me and yelled at me for being clumsy and dropping the box. There were also just the usual temper tantrums. Anything would set her off. She'd have friends over and be mad that they got a bigger cookie and start throwing crap all over the house, throw herself on the floor, and just scream. She was horrible. A side note, the 2 youngest kids drank hot chocolate out of baby bottles in the morning. Legit baby bottles. Ugh. I have more stories about how the parents abused the crap out of me, but that is for another place and time. Jesus Christos. Die klein Schießerkopfen. If you need help dealing with them, there's this guy Dexter I know. Speaking for my pay teacher, he's said that he has just straight up told parents that their kids are butthole, and when we asked for an example, once he'd literally told a parent, your kid is going to fail pay and possibly 7th grade if he keeps his act up. Parent proceeds to be, pay teacher responds with, your kid acts a lot like you. So you could say that it went wrong from the start. As a babysitter for some really crappy children, do not let them walk all over you. Assert your dominance. Like with dogs, little purse dogs get really cocky because they can jump up on their owners and basically do whatever the heck they want, while bigger dogs have to stay off the couch and not jump on people or bark all the time. But the thing is, little kids don't stay little. Little kids, like little dogs, assume they have power because they are allowed to do more of what they want, so they continue to act spoiled and immature. Then, as they grow up, they get harder and harder to control because the kid gets bigger and stronger and faster and louder. Basically, make limits and rules clear from an early age. Small kids shouldn't be allowed to misbehave just because they're young and don't know better. Teach them better, or they will walk all over you. We give them too many chances to do what they're told. We get too tired, overwhelmed, and don't enforce punishments as often as we should. Lack of consistency pretty much sums it up. We're working hard on changing though. They're young enough that it will be alright. Ages 5, 3, 1. Past problem child here. Compared to a few of the things I read, my shittiness was a cakewalk. But here goes. For the longest time my mom thought I would turn out to be an axe murderer. I'm not joking. By 8 I was violent, pushy, and generally hard to control. That's not to say I was horrible on my own. I was being abused by my father, drunken beatings, threatening to kill me. Mom or younger sis if I told anyone he was hurting me. Had a gun in my face when I was 5, so I was screwed up. For those wondering, yes, the signs were there. However, when younger I was extremely active. I climbed and fell out of trees, jumped off swings, monkey bars, and did the normal hyperactive child thing. Well, fast forward to 10. I started eating as a coping mechanism. I was depressed and wanted to die. Tried to kill myself at 12. So life sucked. We come 13 and everything starts to change. I was still a violent little crap. Would beat up my younger sister, who weighed less than half my weight. What changed, however, was that my father wasn't satisfied just beating me anymore. He raped my mom. To those that would say that isn't possible, yes it is. If someone is screaming at you telling you that you are hurting them, then it is wrong, and you should stop. Well, daddy dearest didn't, and mom needed surgery. I still have nightmares about that, even though it has been 9 years. When I was 14 she got a restraining order. It was only 1 month after it happened. Mom had planned it out, and when he went away for a weekend to a Christian retreat, we packed up and got the frick out. Fast forward another 2 years. I'm 16 and it's Christmas Eve. I hated Christmas with a passion. Still very much dislike it, because that's when you know what happened, and had been a little beat to my mom that day. I come to find out the next day that for the first time in my life, All 16 years of it, I had made my mom cry. That was the turning point. I couldn't forgive myself. Still can't. I changed my whole life because of that. I became a pacifist, started studying more in school, got better grades and got a full ride to a community college. I have been out of that abusive situation for 8 years now, and am a completely different person. In that time I went from seeming like I was going to become a murderer to getting a B average in college. Not to mention all the free ride I'm getting. Though considering tuition for me is only $2,000, that isn't saying much. Mayo. He went to a Christian retreat after that. The hypocrisy of some people is staggering. I abuse my child and rape my wife, but I am a good Christian and Jesus loves me. It's a simple thing. Sleep, or lack of it. You don't get any. Your partner doesn't get any. The goddamn kids never sleep. They make so much noise the neighbors don't sleep. My neighbors call the cops cause of the noise, and so the cops don't sleep. This pisses me off. So I have to go out and grab a quick bite. McDonald's, Starbucks and Taco Bell don't sleep. I come home and have to vent. Writing worthless crap like this on Reddit. Now everyone that reads Reddit can't sleep. The whole world is freaking peer to me and my kids cause no one gets any sleep. Seriously, if we all just slept a little longer, we'd get along so much better. I think most of my worst parenting patterns have exhaustion as a factor. As someone who used to deal with lots of kids on a daily basis, taught kids from different ages, my observation was that children who were spoken to with respect by their parents were much more likely to return that respect. Treating children like children encourages it. All of my best students had mothers who, when I presented a behavioral issue, would simply sit the kid down and logically explain it to them. Parents who yell, say because I said so, and otherwise treat kids with less respect tend to get bad kids. However, because I wasn't with them 24 hours a day, I always had a feeling that, just maybe, the evil little bastards are the ones who drove their formerly decent parents over the edge and caused the cycle to begin with. My kid was pretty difficult as a toddler, but from about age 5 to 10 she stayed out of trouble and was actually incredibly well mannered and charming. As a teenager she was incurably angry, and though we tried everything and she went through several rehabs, it would take me like 4 hours to write out everything I went through with her. She is an addict as an adult and she has done the most horrible things, including to her family. We all tried very hard to be good role models and teach her good morals and whatnot, but we failed miserably. Currently she's sober again. Just heard she's in a halfway house in Central Texas and was glad to hear she was alive and safe. She's 23 now. A lot of the kids she grew up with who were horrible brats at 7, 8, 9, 10 grew out of it and are leading productive, healthy lives now. I think childhood and adolescence are both very confusing and scary times, and most of us do things in those eras that our fully formed adult selves would never do. I know this doesn't answer the question specifically, but I thought it might be relevant. I think most kids have their bad moments. So maybe you just witnessed one of those? I have small kids and they are usually quite good, but when they are really hungry or tired they can act terrible. I try not to let them get to that point, but I am not perfect and sometimes I forget to fuel them up before going out somewhere. TLDR. A hungry or tired child can be a little monster. I believe in temperament, obviously. It's clear to anyone who's ever met kids that they can be born determined, stubborn, not fond of change, etc. I don't believe any of these things make a kid bad. They make him respond better or worse to a given parenting style. They make you stretch yourself, because he's different from you. I think the number of kids who are actually born so damaged as to be unable to lead a productive life is minuscule. This includes things like child onset schizophrenia and psychopathy, although I suspect psychopathy it's a bit less cut and dried and biological than we like to think. I feel incredibly lucky. My daughter, who turns 5 tomorrow, is an angel. Even going through the separation of her parents at a young age, consistent uncertainties, and the constant need to adapt to new situations, she has been incredible. Of course she's not absolutely perfect. She cries sometimes when she doesn't get her way or when she's sad about something. That's a fact of childhood and learning though, I suppose. I'm in no way saying that I'm some kind of perfect parent. but I will say that what we've done has worked really well for her first 5 years. I often wonder how much of a child's mood is upbringing and how much is inherent. Before I was a parent, I often immediately judged kids as being spoiled brats. Granted, that was probably wrong of me, but I often see kids getting their way after enough whining, which of course reinforces the belief that if I cry enough, I'll get my way. My ex and I talked a lot about how we would raise a child if we had one prior to my daughter being born, and sticking to that has avoided the consistent outbursts that I see many parents going through. If there is anything I could say to future parents, while noting that every child is different and it's not an end-all solution, I'd say the following. This is just what worked for us, and I think any child can change habits. 1. Explain everything, because there's not an answer. People complain a lot about their child just going off and doing things. I'm not saying nix self-discovery, but I am saying that if they ask a question, give them an actual answer. You want them to always feel comfortable coming to you and to know they'll actually have things explained. It works a lot. 2. Don't yell. I never thought I would say that, but it's true. They can sense tone, and honestly yelling just teaches them that it's a good way to react. My daughter has gotten a swat on the butt twice in her life, because it has never been necessary otherwise. When she hears my tone switched to upset or bothered, her face instantly shows that recognition and she knows something she did was wrong. 3. The instant reaction shouldn't be to swat your kid. Again, I'm not one of those don't lay a finger on your kids types. I was raised with severe butt beatings when I screwed up. It worked, I needed it, and with the kind of kid I deserved it. When I see parents that have a kid in their shopping cart that won't sit down and they immediately smack the kid, I cringe. Save that for when it's really warranted. Simply not wanting to do something isn't a reason. Hitting someone? That's a reason. I think the majority, though not all of people, don't realize that they have bad kids. If anyone comments about how ill-behaved their kids are, it results in that defensive OMFG don't tell me how to parent BS. Typically followed with this is how I was raised and it worked out fine. See? That logic needs no analysis. LOL. I don't think my son is horrible, but he could fit into a difficult child definition. To clarify, he does get in trouble frequently in school, has trouble doing what he's told versus what he thinks he should do, and being argumentative with me and teachers. I'm a very caring and involved parent, who never has stopped trying. I have researched and tried many different techniques of parenting and discipline. I keep up, usually weekly, with his teacher so we can be on the same page with disciplining him. You ask, where did it all go wrong? I have had more sleepless nights trying to answer this question. Me and my husband, his father, have racked our brains, fallen apart, cried, heartbroken, wondering why. We came to the agreement that no matter what happens, we just choose to love him and never give up. Even when it seems like it does not help. When it's all said and done, I know I can live with that. I married a man who had been divorced. His kids were great. The little girl was smart and tough and the easiest kid to have in your life. The boy was an imaginative and smart kid who would bite, break things, scream for the police and cry for help as he beat your head in. His father tried for the next 15 years to get him help and the boy's mother wouldn't have it. The boy is 19. We've tried everything we couldn't and now he's an adult in the same situation. 10 years ago we had our first child together. A beautiful boy who loves everyone. Around 2 years old everything changed. I thought I was doing something wrong. We tried so many different things. The only thing that worked was holding him while he screamed, taking him out of situations that made him upset. We hesitated having more children, only momentarily. We had 2 more children, a boy and a girl who are quiet, respectful, silly children. Nothing like their 2 older brothers. Everything like their eldest sister. What did we do differently that made them turn out so completely opposite? Nothing. Obviously we raised them as individuals who had different needs, but we didn't totally throw in the towel on these children. 2 of our boys were born with severe mood disorders and autism. We love them and won't give up on them. We get a lot of crap from people who assume we are bad parents and have evil children. They aren't evil and they aren't bad kids. They try so hard to live within the rules of society and struggle so to control themselves. I don't make excuses for my family. They are who we are and we are in your society. We struggle every dang day to be acceptable to you folks who think we are horrid parents with evil children. Parent here, giving my 2 cents on this. It does no good to yell or make threats if there's no follow through or discipline. My kids knew when they were little if they misbehaved in a store they wouldn't be getting a treat or little toy. Good behavior should be rewarded, not the other way around. I have a sister, she has a son. I love them both dearly. They are horrible at existence. When one whines the other whines back. It has actually become hard to distinguish the two if you can't see them while they are whining. The boy gets everything he wants, not just from his mom but from everybody in the family, for he is the only one in his generation and has been for 10 years now. I have been guilty of spoiling him myself but have recently realized the error of my ways. The boy has not earned anything in his entire life. Again, I love him but he is a brat. I am going out to build him a tree fort for his 10th birthday, something I always wanted and never had as a kid, this next weekend, but have already decided that I will only be working on it so long as he is. I hope that I can avoid being the evil uncle while also making this kid realize that the world isn't always going to hand him everything when he whines for it. Wish me luck. Well, this will be buried, but here goes. First, I am not a parent. I am the oldest half brother to my dad's 4 kids. 2 brothers, 2 sisters. I am 30. B1 is 24. S1 is 23. B2 is 21 and S2 is 19. My dad and his now ex-wife fought for as long as I can remember, and she and I always were at odds because I was always stirring crap up. As an adult I feel her pain and I would have beat my butt a lot more often. I spent the weekends there a lot until I was 14. I wanted to move in and my ma let me. At 14 I was smoking grass with my old man, and continued to do so until I was 20. I started getting my weed from my pops, and my brothers did years later. To make this too long story shorter, I blame the crap out of my dad. I have wised up now, but both of my brothers still smoke pot and one is a completely worthless frick. The other still makes questionable decisions, but I think he's finding his way. Neither of my sisters do drugs or drink now, but the oldest is disgustingly obese and the other is a complete Jesus freak. Literally attended a Jesus camp near Austin, and has been there for almost 2 years now. My dad has been the biggest failure to all of us that I could imagine a dad could be. He played every card here that you all talk about. More worried about being buddies than a dad. Never followed through with any disciplinary threats. Even if we fricked up, he would always try to quantify what we did right. Smoked pot with at least 4 of us, and did M and coke with me. My youngest sister was the only one to graduate HS. The oldest had her first baby senior year. The dream house we moved into is something straight out of nightmares now because it was never taken care of. I have never seen my dad work full time, though I have heard him talk about it. So here's the kicker. My old man was a rich kid. Grandpa has a ridiculous amount of money. I'll never know, but I know his boat was $4 million and he just sold his personal plane W pilot to trim down on expenses. Without GPA's money, none of this would have been possible. So it may as well have been the government. B2 still lives at home and has been getting $600 a month to go to college for the past 3 years. He's been to 2 semesters 2 years apart. He has never held a job for longer than a couple weeks, and he is a fat lazy frick who I refuse to speak with. This last holiday season I've essentially stopped speaking with my dad. My reason: there is no good end to how you are living. Whether it's jail, health complications, the house being condemned, whatever, I want no part in it. I haven't spoken with him for a couple months now and it's killing me. That little kid in me that was best friends with my dad still wants him in my life. The 30-year-old with a family does not want my kids to be exposed to his shenanigans. TLDR. My old man is a pothead, more concerned about the now than the future. The results are painfully displayed in his 4 kids. Sadly, psychopathy isn't preventable, but just say no to giving a kid an iPhone before the age of 10, or spoiling the crap out of them. My kids have been playing with my old iPhones since they were little. They take pictures and make the most adorable movies. If that's spoiled, then I will spoil them all day. My sister is a pretty terrible person. We were raised the same way, fairly open. I had absolutely no restrictions. I could have girls in my room. I had absolutely no curfew. My parents even thought I went to one of my friend's house to smoke pot and let me. We actually stayed up all night playing Halo in a cabin. So my eyes were red and I smelled like I tried to cover up any smell using fireplace smoke. She was 2 years older and had more restrictions placed on her due to her doing things like sneaking out and driving home drunk. They probably could have punished her more when we were children. She would always start the fights, and when we were left alone in the house she would sadistically attack me. She would pound on my door for hours, and since I didn't have a lock I needed to sit in front of it holding it shut. I don't really blame them though, as there was no way for them to know what I wouldn't have gave for a video recording device like every kid has now. Anyways, I think some people are just going to be bad people, and there's not much you can do about it. She genuinely takes pleasure in other people's pain. It's pretty ironic she became a nurse. My sister is horrible at home. My mother spoils her because she's her baby. She doesn't do her schoolwork. Homeschooled. My mom actually made me complete part of her tests online for her. I've told them I never will again, because she'll never learn. She has never cleaned a day in Get Life. We used to move every year or twice a year and she never touched one moving box, and can't even help my mom with dishes. My mom has health problems. Even when I was 8 months pregnant I had to clean her room for her so my mom wouldn't get mad. She gets to sleep all day, wake up to play the PS3, and sleep again. My mother won't listen when I say she needs public school. She's not learning anything, or discipline. She gets these horrible attitudes, which result in her getting what she wants. She even convinces my mom to spend well over $300 on PSN cards for her games. Right after she says no, I won't do the dishes. I was never allowed to do that or Monster Mom would come out. Now I was forced to grow up quick. I even helped raise my sister when we were younger. I was an emotional crutch for my mom. And my mom jokes about me being jealous. But honestly I just wish they would raise her better. She's never going to learn anything being treated like a princess. What kind of 13-year-old doesn't brush her own hair or know how to sweep? Sorry for the rant. This has just been bugging me for years, and my mom won't listen. People who grew up with strict parents, what was their most unreasonable rule? I was called at a friend's house at 11 PM at night because I left 2 t-shirts slung over the chair in my room versus hanging them in my closet. I had to go back to my house and then I was grounded for a week. Upon getting home, my mother had gone through my entire room and tossed every item out of my dresser. She claimed they were messily put in the dresser. Fun stuff. My stepmom did this to me. Anytime my closet was a little messy or my clothes weren't folded the way she liked, she would dump everything onto the floor and into the middle of my room. I have ADHD and coming home from school seeing that gave me the worst anxiety. It didn't do anything but make me better at hiding my messes and make me incredibly resentful toward her. My mom was very strict about the ratings of movies and video games. One year for Christmas a relative gave me a copy of Star Wars: Shadows of the Empire for the Nintendo 64. It was a T14 rated game and I wouldn't be turning 13 for another 4 weeks. My mom had my dad drive me to Toys R Us to return the game. We walked into the store and over to the games and he had me pick out an E for everyone rated game. We proceeded to check out and as we went to the car he handed me not only the new game but the game we were supposed to have returned to buy it as well and told me not to let her catch me playing it. That guy deserves a high five. Not my parents, but I had a friend who got it pretty bad. If you want to play for 1 hour, you have to also practice piano for 1 hour. These and other such rules were posted on his bedroom door. I had a friend who wasn't allowed to say the word stupid and tried to report me to the teacher when I said it. A teacher yelled at me and then told me it was okay in private and not to say it around that one kid. Nice guy, though, just had a helicopter mom. My kids are allowed to say stupid, but we always taught them that it was never okay using it referring to a person. My oldest is 10 and when my youngest daughter heard her call something stupid she ran to tell on her older sister. My wife and I cracked up laughing when the little one couldn't understand why she hadn't gotten her sister in trouble. My dad didn't believe in periods, and when I cried that I needed feminine products gave me food stamps to buy them. I was humiliated. My parents were pretty slack on everything except one thing. No video games console ever, and no online games on the computer because that's how you get virus and make the computer run slow. So I was playing my morpg when they were sleeping, in a hidden file, in a file, in another file, in another file, and I was changing the appearance of every file icon. And this is how you reverse your child's sleep schedule. My mom's curfew was 7 PM and her brother's was 12 AM. Her brother was about 2 years younger than her, and my granddaddy's logic was that girls get themselves into more trouble than boys. My poor mother only ever attended church functions for fun until she graduated from high school. My stepmom decided that I was using too much shampoo. She would get a little medicine cup before my shower and pour the designated amount into it. It wasn't ever enough because I had hair down to my butt. I also wasn't allowed to use conditioner. Screw her. I also wasn't allowed to use conditioner. I got a paper route when I was 12 years old. The very first thing I bought with my earnings was a giant bottle of conditioner. I wasn't allowed to cross any streets until middle school. Thus, my best friends were the ones who lived on the same block as me. When I was in 5th grade, I wrote some stuff in my diary about masturbating. And like a month later, my mom went through all my stuff. She would randomly go in my room, tear it apart. I'd always get in trouble for something, and then I'd have to clean up the mess and be grounded for whatever amount she felt like that day. So anyway, she found that diary entry. She picks me up from school and won't talk to me. I get home, my door was removed from my room, that diary entry was taped on the wall, and I was threatened with a belt if I didn't answer all her invasive questions. Fricked up. Way to give a kid a complex about their sexuality. Mom hits me with kitchen utensils and yells that I am not allowed to put my hands up to defend myself from her strikes. I am not allowed to do the following: use the washing machine, wash the dishes, pull the weeds, vacuum outside of my room. I must ask to use the vacuum. I can't cook a meal. I can't have the remote. I get instructed on how to use the microwave that I've been using for years, and if I ask where we are going I get told out and I have to dress in jeans, a shirt and running shoes no matter how hot because he doesn't like shorts, and no jacket no matter how cold. We could not listen to music with guitars in it. I will never forget the day my brother was listening to Sabbath Bloody Sabbath and my father took the radio and threw it through the window. Spent my childhood listening to Richard Marx and Michael Bolton. Thanks Dad. For every minute I was late coming in from curfew, I got grounded a week. I once spent 10 weeks grounded due to a sobriety checkpoint. Whoa, for me it was every minute late is a minute earlier the next day. Mine is logical, yours is insane. We couldn't go sledding during the winter, or any other season, obviously, because my mom was a neat freak and didn't want snow slogged into the garage. So, no snow playing of any kind, really. Never built a snowman. Did go sledding when I was an adult. It's pretty great. All of our clothes in our closet had to be arranged by color, descending in order by shade. So, for example, midnight blue at one end of the blue section, and Tahil blue at the other. There was a system in place for colors, too, so if the yellows were by the purples, for example, there'd be heck to pay. No shoes on in the house under any circumstances. Was super uncomfortable when my brother's friend, who had prosthetic legs and always had shoes on, came over and didn't take his shoes off. Mum got really mad and confronted him. No Legos or puzzles allowed, as they make messes and look like disorder. I freaking love puzzles as an adult. One of my favorite hobbies. 30 minutes of internet time a day, and 99% of the time, that was supervised, as in mom looking over my shoulder and commenting on conversations. We had WebV, RIP, and when they weren't home, they would literally lock the keyboard in a toolbox. My sis and I could never have friends stay over because the house is a mess. No amount of cleaning satisfied mom, because the real reason was she wanted to be able to fight with my dad at will. I had to write essays on TV shows that I wanted to watch, in order to have them unblocked by the parental controls. I remember writing a riveting piece on the educational and cultural benefit of Disney's That's So Raven. Also, I wasn't allowed to watch PG-13 movies, even after turning 13. Wasn't allowed to rest my head on my hand with my elbow on any table while there was also food on that table. If my parents found out I was going too fast in my car, small town, so other parents would snitch on me pretty regularly for going 10 over. I had to pay my parents speeding tickets. Also, they would make me pay for the whole family's phone bill if I texted a boy. By the time I moved out at 17, I had given them well over $1,000 in punishment money earned at the Sonic drive-in. I was not allowed to talk to boys. One Christmas Eve day, I was doing last-minute shopping in the downtown of our little town. I ran into 2 male friends from my German class and we talked for several minutes and wished each other a Merry Christmas. Oh, I was 15 at the time. My older sister drove by and saw me, told my parents I was hanging out with boys. When I walked in the house, both my parents were waiting and the yelling began. Some Christmas Eve. Sneeyike. I was from a large family and discipline was very strict. If myself or one of my siblings broke one of the major rules, my parents would hold a truth session. All the children would be brought to my dad's study where the guilty party would be given an opportunity to confess. If nobody came forward, we would be hit in turn in order of ascending age. The eldest 4 were hit with a sewer rod while, in deference to their age, the youngest ones would get a whack of a bamboo stick. A sewer rod is basically a 4-foot long flexible rubber rod, around an inch thick and with a metal cap. It would leave the most remarkable welts. Horrendous things really. Anyway, this would continue until someone admitted their guilt. At that point they would receive the blows that everyone else had received to that point. So that was awful. I fully acknowledge that. I'm under no illusions. However, that wasn't the actual unreasonableness. No, the unreasonable part was that the person who caused the truth session didn't always receive the accrued punishment owed for having their siblings beaten. Sometimes they could just be let go, making their siblings hate them for causing pain to them. There'd be no explanation. The study door would be opened and we'd all be told to leave. That meant you could be rewarded for holding out and avoiding the punishment you'd definitely get if you admitted it at the beginning. My parents now tell fun stories about how when I was a child and I'd done something wrong, I'd always begin with, "Let me tell you my story." How they chortle at my childish phrasing while I recall the terror that such an approach was meant to stave off. Have a friend who isn't allowed to go out if he's already had too much fun this weekend. That's the only reason. They think he'll become corrupted if he has too much fun and that he won't know how to work. He's in college. Females of the family must cook and clean on holidays while males watch TV. Must bus males' plates every night. No visiting friends' houses, no friends over at our house all the way through high school. Hair cannot be cut at or above shoulder. 7 PM bedtime. Not curfew. Bedtime. Through junior high. Strictly enforced. Needless to say, I rebelled strong and hard. There were a lot, but the most ridiculous one to me was they didn't want me volunteering during high school. I was visiting the elderly and they said it was too dangerous to be around strangers like that and the time was taking away from my studies. Most extracurriculars I wanted to do they had a huge problem with, but it didn't hit me how absurd it was until it was about senior citizens. The ironic thing is those things look great on college applications. I wasn't allowed to shrug or say I don't know if anything tech related went wrong. It was assumed that I broke it on purpose, even if the only reason anyone knew it was broken is because I was trying to fix it. Birthday parties were a no-go. Christmas was a no-go. Any party whatsoever was a no-go. My father was very strict. I wasn't allowed to have alone time with my mother. He beat the crap out of me constantly. But the oddest thing that still bugs me to this day is that he would burn all my things as punishment. And I get it. Seeing my toys and valuables burning sucked, and I probably learned some lessons. But he not only burned toys, he would burn everything. Every year or so for school he would go to Meijer and buy me new school clothes and shoes. He would also burn those, like sometimes days after he bought them. At 8 years old I remember thinking, you now have to buy me more clothes. But that wasn't the point, I suppose. He once took me to the Palace of Auburn Hills in Detroit to see the Globetrotters one year, and during the night he bought me a Globetrotters basketball and jersey. We had a fun night. The very next day, I had left something on the floor in my room and his punishment, among other things, was to burn the basketball and jersey he bought for like $150 less than 24 hours earlier. It just never made sense to me. My friends would joke about it all throughout middle and high school. Seriously, one of the psychopathic answers on here. Sorry you had to live with that. This blew my mind. I was not allowed to wear makeup or shave until 16. My mom was controlling about food. Everything was kept track of. I had to be in marching band in order to get my permit. I had a job, but even if I worked second shift, which I did, and came home at 11, I would have to clear the plates from the table for the dinner that they ate. If I asked to hang out with a friend in the presence of said friend, the answer was automatically no. I was only allowed to do things if the friend or their parent was paying for it. The straw that broke the camel's back, and ultimately made me move out at 16, was that I had to live like a boarder. Showers cost $5. A load of laundry was $1 for washer, $1 for dryer. Telephone time cost $25 per minute. No trends or passing fads. Pokemon, banned. Barbies, banned. Beanie Babies, banned. PlayStation Gamma Boys, banned. Anything particularly fashionable or popular regardless of actual merit was met with derision, and we'd be mocked for even suggesting interest. We were achingly frumpy kids with interests and cultural references, or lack thereof, that isolated us from our peers, and they wondered why each of us were bullied. Pretty sure the verdict is in on Barbie and PlayStation. They aren't fads. My parents were slack. My best friend's parents were so strict, she would escape to my house for freedom. 12th grade, prom. Her parents allowed her to go to prom but said she wasn't allowed to dance. We all went to prom, had fun dancing, until she saw her parents standing at the back watching. She then moved out for university. After her first year, she came home to work for the summer. She had been on her own for a year and supporting herself, and her parents gave her a 9 p.m. curfew. She spent a lot of time at my house that summer. She was married by the next summer and didn't have to deal with it. Individuality was almost a cardinal sin in my parents' house. You wear what they like. You eat what they like. You do what they like. You do not under any circumstances act like a human being with hopes, dreams, and opinions. My mom was insanely controlling about food. Weird rules were in place, like 1 slice of lunch meat per sandwich. No one but her was allowed to cook. She'd make one giant batch of spaghetti or something and we'd have leftovers for days, so she only had to make dinner twice a week. She did not work or anything, just didn't like cooking every day. Breakfast was cold cereal and you'd only be allowed a small bowl with just enough milk to moisten it. Occasionally she'd bake something she called corn toasties, which was simply cornbread baked in a sheet pan. She'd cut them into squares and fill the freezer with them, and we could have one of those for breakfast as an alternative. Once when I was 14, I bought a pack of hot dogs at the store, snuck them home, and lit the grill. I was almost done cooking them when she came out screaming about fire hazards and swatted the plate out of my hand. She had been making spaghetti. What an ungrateful little bastard I was. So then she orders a pizza for the rest of my family, wraps individual servings of spaghetti in freezer paper, and puts them away. She tells me that I will be eating nothing else until it's all gone. Took about 2 months to choke it all down. Went without eating a lot of days. I was also grounded for over a year, but I sure learned a lot about consequences. Oh god, I wasn't allowed to go out, like ever. If I was gonna hang out with someone, it had to be on the weekend, planned at least a week ahead, and my parents had to meet their parents and drive me there. They would come get me before the sun went down. Not a rule, but if I got up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night or was reading because I couldn't sleep, my mom would come screaming up the stairs, "Why are you up?" and sometimes hit me. I wasn't allowed to close the door in my room. There's more, but that's what I can think of right now. Mostly my mother would just yell about everything. My parents actually removed the door from my room when I was like 16. I got it back when I started sleeping naked. Not my parents, but my high school friend had very strict parents. This was shortly after 9/11 and the anthrax scare. It was Halloween evening and a group of us were supposed to head out and light fireworks around the neighborhood. Well, my friend wasn't allowed to come out at night because his mom was worried about terrorists bombing our city with anthrax. We live in Canada. No TV or rock music. Both were of the devil. I did watch some TV when at a friend's house and I mostly listened to the music I liked, but I did miss out on some TV series that my friends talked about. I feel you on all of this. We only had a TV because a friend was moving away and wanted to give away their TV, but it was barely used, and non-gospel music was universally banned. Was forced to drop out of school in the 5th grade because my grandmother believed that most people have no souls and were demon possessed. She said that the world was unsafe to roam freely because Satan was trying to corrupt God's children. This led to a very sheltered life and very silly things like having to pray over every individual item that entered the house. Food, toiletries, dish soap, you name it. I'd get woken up at 2 AM to be screamed at for 3+ hours over something God had told her that I did wrong. So yeah, I guess the most unreasonable rule I grew up with was not being allowed to leave the house. Not my parents, but my best friend's parents were insanely strict growing up. When we were pre-teens and sleepovers were all the rage, if we wanted to have one, we literally lived on the same street. It's a 2-minute walk between our parents' houses. We had to plan it at least a month in advance, if not more. Even then, for whatever reason, her parents would only agree to them rarely, so really we'd only get to have like 2-3 a year. One time I started getting sick at school on a Friday and we had planned a sleepover, ages ago as usual, for that night. I was feeling absolutely awful but tried my best to stay at school because obviously if I went home sick the sleepover would be called off. Made it to lunch and then the teacher called me over and said I was white as a ghost and burning up and had to go home. My best friend and I were devastated. Sad day. Dad was a narcissist. Biggest rule in the house was not to make any noise around him. If he was home the whole house got quiet and tense. Even my mom used to eat her cereal in the bedroom because she'd get in trouble for chewing crunchy food. Now she's long rid of him and married to a way better guy, but she still apologizes for eating crackers. Once got electronic access taken away because I don't share myself. Jokes on them, I'm still a recluse. Can't fix what ain't broken. Reminds me of what my mom said a few years back when she took away my phone. Apparently I wasn't functioning correctly. I did my chores, made dinner, had good grades. No idea what that means to this day. In the 1970s, my extremely conservative Mormon mother would take the masks from out grocery store plastic Halloween costumes, those wretched ones with the thin elastic string to hold them on, and widen the eye holes with scissors as much as she could without destroying the mask. When we asked why this was necessary, she informed us that in our church, we don't like masks because it was a group of masked men who murdered Brother Joseph Smith. So we want to be able to see your face clearly enough even with your Halloween masks on. Totally pointless and ineffectual dogmatism, except that whatever that is was never any kind of LDS dogma. There's a rule about masks in the church building, so costumes shouldn't have masks, but I just assumed it was a safety thing. We need to know who you are type thing, so maybe your mom added her own reasoning behind it without actually knowing what was up. My dad wrote a whole manual on his rules. Most unreasonable was you must tear the bread. You cannot use a knife to cut your bread. I was interested in learning about Wicca because I was young and in high school, early 2000s, when Harry Potter was still happening and all that stuff. My mom and stepdad found out by reading an email I sent to my cousin. It was the summer and they freaked out, took everything. I couldn't read. I couldn't listen to music. I couldn't watch TV or movies with the family. I couldn't hang out with friends. Couldn't talk to my cousin anymore. Basically anything that might bring me pleasure was taken. They made me do chores all day, would go on family outings without me. Soon I became a shell of a person. I was going to kill myself. I wanted to. I just was scared of death, so I decided not to go through with it. So I turned myself off. They hated it. They weren't getting a rise out of me anymore. Anything they said to me, to extending my sentence, I wouldn't react to. Since their narcissism relied on a victim, I wasn't a source anymore. So they extended my grounding even further. They could have told me to go pick up dog crap in the backyard with my teeth and I wouldn't have flinched. My stepdad's family, just as terrible, would come over and belittle me as well. I was told to smile, so I'd humor then and flash an empty smile for a second and return to my blank expression I had to find solace in. All this to save me from going to heck. The only thing that saved me that summer was my visitation with my dad. My mom and stepdad tried to paint him in a bad light like HR was the abusive one. Even as a kid I knew my dad didn't make me feel as bad and empty as they did. I eventually got through it. Years later, about 4 years ago now, I ended up working at a job, unexpectedly, with a girl I used to play with in the neighborhood. I always wondered why she stopped showing up when I wasn't home or in another part of the house. She came to the door and asked to play. One of my parents opened the door and told her I didn't want to play with her anymore. I always wondered why she never hung out with me or talked to me. Even finding this out in a more recent term, I cried and apologized to her. I could have had a great friendship with a lot of people, but they just wanted to alienate and control me. Unfortunately, this is just the tip of the iceberg. I don't talk to them anymore, but I still live in the same city as them and I have a lot of social anxiety because of that. One of my roommates exhibits some of the behavior my parents were so kind as to bestow on me. It's making things difficult to handle. I just want people to be happy and live in a healthy environment. It's so fricked up that the biggest monsters in the world are the people closest to you. One of my parents opened the door and told her I didn't want to play with her anymore. That's horrendous. I just found out my mom deletes her Facebook account when she gets a friend request from someone she doesn't like, then makes a new one. She has done this 3 or 4 times this year. What's your most WTF parent v technology story? My girlfriend's uncle was asking about something recently and someone suggested that he Google it to find out the answer. He replied, it's after 5 PM. Wouldn't Google be closed by now? My dad would close out the entire Gmail window when he was done reading an email, then open up a new window, go to Gmail, log in, and read the next email. My mom couldn't believe it when she saw it. Mom could not believe that you don't have to restart the whole computer. My father thinks AOL is the default homepage for every computer and gets min-fucked when the little house in the corner opens Google or some other site. My mom thought our desktop was broken because the Google homepage changed designs. My dad clicks the back button until he finally reaches when he was at his original homepage so he doesn't leave any portals open. Holy crap, I love this. I can totally understand the logic. My father was an Air Force electrical engineer during the Vietnam War and set up generators in the jungle under mortar fire and crap. So, back in 2003 or so my PC straight up died on me during finals week. The computer shop guys couldn't figure it out. Dad gets his electrical meters out and takes the time to test everything from the power supply back. Those buttholes didn't even look inside the power supply. The quality control seal is unbroken. And figures out the problem is a dirty connection on a stick of RAM. He cleans it, builds the box back together, and voila, the PC comes on. To this day the old bastard still somehow makes the search bar in his IE window disappear once a week. He also knows how to fix a washing machine, but needs someone to turn it on for him. Your dad sounds like a freaking badass that makes up for his computer skills. Years ago, I gave my mom my email address, which was at hotmail.com. A bit later, she finally worked up the nerve to ask me whether or not I was gay. Parents won't use Chrome or Firefox, they say it's not the real internet they pay for. Only Internet Explorer is real internet supposedly. My mom was getting rid of her PC to buy an iMac. She consulted Geek Squad, naturally, about any steps she would need to take to make the transition as smooth as possible. Those mother suckers told her that her MP3s needed to be upgraded to be Mac compatible. She paid them for this service. It was the one time I wished she had called me for tech support. My father just learned how to use emoticons when he texts us, but he still isn't sure what they all mean, and if he types the wrong one he doesn't know how to delete it, so he just keeps going until he gets it right. X. Dinner's at 7. See you soon. Equals. Maybe your dad is just really emotionally unstable. My mom has no patience with the computer. The computer is getting old, so it runs kinda slow at times. Whenever she's on the Internet Explorer of course, because she refuses to try anything else, and it's not loading something fast enough. She gets pissed off and starts clicking over and over again, click 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 click, until the dang thing freezes up completely, which then sends her into a rage of yelling and even more clicking. Then she yells at me to come fix it because obviously my sister and I have fricked up the computer somehow and I'm the only one that can fix it. Not sure if I can explain it properly. Typing with one finger, like press a letter, take hand away and look at screen. Type another letter and repeat until the word has finished. Not only this, but every time they type they slam the key down so hard just to make sure it works. Hunt and peck. My mortal enemy. My mother has a Facebook and 3 friends. One is me. One is my ex-boyfriend who helped her make said Facebook. The other is a novelty account for a dog. Someone please explain. I hate it when dogs add me. My dad texts like he's in the military or something. If I text him a piece of information he'll reply, copy. Instead of saying goodbye in a text he'll say, over. In the late 90s I encouraged my dad to put his CD collection on his computer, as much as would fit on the relatively small hard drive, so that he could listen to it more conveniently. He refused because that's how you get viruses on your computer. No amount of explanation would change his mind on this. My mom worked in an office for 30+ years and mainly corresponded through email for the latter half of that. However, when she sends an email from her laptop at home, she'll be like, now what do I click? And how do I send it? I understand needing an adjustment time to getting used to the nuances of a new email account. But this has been 3+ years now. Maybe she does the same thing at work and just has the most patient IT department in history. My friend's mom would refuse to use Firefox and only would use IE. So finally when she got a new computer, he downloaded Firefox, changed the desktop shortcut image to the IE logo, and named it Internet Explorer. She has no idea. The perfect solution. My stepmom thinks that her computer is slow as heck and has a lot of viruses because they get transferred from my computer. No, those come from my dad. DLing fuckloads of P on there, woman. You should teach your dad how to properly view download P. It's uncomfortable, but we all have to have the talk without dads at some point. I run dual monitors and my dad thinks that I have 2 computers. I explain that I don't. I'm just using one. He calls me a selfish ingrate. Quite a few people out there equate monitors to computers and don't realize that hunkin' black box sitting there humming is the computer. I have 3 screens, and I enjoy the reactions of people that walk into my room for the first time and see my desk with its end-to-end screens. Not my parents but my grandparents. Specifically my grandmother. I had to go over and teach my 60-something-year-old grandmother how to use iTunes. That was the most painful 2 hours of my life. She also thought that when you had iTunes cards that you had to think of the music that you wanted and then drive back to the store where you got the card and get your music there. My parents try to punish me by deleting the internet from the computer. 2 problems with that. They deleted the shortcut of Internet Explorer, and even if they had somehow uninstalled it, I use Google Chrome. I type pretty quickly, 100-120 WPM, and every time I'm around my parents they think I'm going to break the computer because it can't handle how quickly I'm typing. I work at Best Buy. This elderly gentleman came in looking for a new PC, laptop specifically. I asked him why is he replacing his current one, and what he plans on using it for. In a somewhat whispered tone, he says, "Your guy, to be honest it's only gonna be used to watch P. What's the best antivirus you got?" When I was in middle and high school, my parents would take the keyboard for the computer to work with them if I stayed homesick. Even at a younger age, I managed to buy my own keyboard that I kept hidden for just those occasions. They had no idea how I managed to get onto the computer the entire time without a keyboard. On the same vein, they hid the password for the internet, back when it needed one, on the underside of the router. My parents are smart enough to take the router so I have no internet access. It's the most annoying crap. My mom didn't know that to go to her website, you need to type it into the address window. She just yelled and cried at me going, "Why are you so mean? This isn't funny." It was. My mum prefaces everything with the examples include, key it in there on the Google. Oh, you're on the Reddit again. It's too cute to correct. My mom makes everything plural. Burger Kings, Taco Bells, Walmarts. I don't understand it. My 80-year-old mom was stuck in the hospital for a few days. Someone loaned her a laptop computer to keep from getting bored. It certainly kept her busy, as the computer was from people who are about as computer illiterate as you can get and still get on Facebook. When I went to visit her, she started in on how messed up that computer was. There was a gig of stuff in the Firefox cache, a gig, etc. She straightened that machine up enough to be usable. If she'd stayed there another day or two, it would have worked as good as new. Mum will replace power supples, RAM, hard drives, whatever. One pastime of hers is to see how far viruses can get in. If one makes it past her antivirus stuff, then root them out. It's pretty rare that she needs my help at all. I've got to be proud of her. When my dad first joined Facebook, he searched for people using his status update. At first I thought it was funny until my sphincter clenched shut at the thought of seeing a P search on my newsfeed, so I quickly called him and set him straight. Last week I was helping my mom with her new computer and she needed iTunes for her iPad. After downloading it, she won't install it because of the line of text that Windows has at the bottom of every dialog box that says this program has been downloaded, blah blah blah, may contain harmful software or something along those lines. After convincing her that it is okay, I leave, go to work, come back, and she is reading the entirety of the agreement statement. She said she had been reading it on and off all day so that she could install it. Fasapum. TL. DR. Mom, read the entire iTunes agreement before installing. Well, that is the only way to ensure you won't become part of a human-sent iPad. I'm a computer technician at a local shop in a small, rural town in Midwest, USA, so I have plenty of WTF computer stories. Here's some of my favorites. I can't remember the exact issue with the computer, but the guy's shutdown procedure for turning his system off was to unplug the power strip from the wall. He couldn't understand why his less than 1-year-old computer could possibly have hardware issues. Constantly have people with viruses that ask me where they got them from. Because they don't go to P sites. Because, you know, P sites are the only sources of viruses. Had a woman call and ask me what's a good website to download music without paying for it. Told her to Google it. Figured that was a better response than if you don't know how to do it, you don't deserve to. All-time favorite. Guy calls in with a problem with his new mouse. It was moving. It was acting all crazy. Love the technical diagnosis. I try everything. 15 minutes into the call, I'm at a complete loss. I mean, it's a mouse, not a very complicated device. Finally my boss calls out from his office. Ask him if the buttons are at the top or the bottom. I do. His response? I don't see no buttons at all. I ask him if the cord is coming out of the top or bottom. Mother had his mouse upside down. Brain explodes. I complete the call, immediately walk outside, smoke a cigarette, and weep for humanity. My dad wanted to write an email to our Norwegian cousins in Norwegian, so he used Google to translate from English to Norwegian. Easy enough. Once he had the Norwegian version, he got out a piece of paper and copied down the letter. He then opened Outlook and retyped the letter into the email. My dad forgot that you can copy and paste. I think the more egregious error here is trying to use Google Translate to actually communicate with someone. Oh god, my parents are software engineers and still do this kind of crap. Most notably, probably blaming the computer slowing down on my installing of video games. My dad was all about this. He was convinced that installing games on a PC actually physically damaged it because games were not meant for computers. The existence of a gaming market and various PC gaming hardware apparently meant nothing. My mom wanted Facebook, but she doesn't want anyone to see her, or talk to her, or friend her, or know she has Facebook. My dad accuses me of deleting his music off of his computer and threatens to cancel the internet. Fun fact, I don't live at home, and somehow my dad thinks that one. I remotely frick with his computer too. He can cancel the whole internet. Long story short, Set my mother up with wireless in her house so she could tote her laptop around and surf the web. Get a call a few days later, her bitching on the phone that AT&T are sons of B and lying bastards, saying nothing's wrong with her internet when she knows that something is very wrong with her internet. Basically she can't get online. I start trying to troubleshoot over the phone when I hear Dr. Manthan Chansenson. Please report to anal extraction. Dr. Manthan Chansenson, please report to anal extraction. Mom, where are you? At Children's Medical Center. Had to take your cousin to physical therapy. How far away is Children's from your house? I don't know. 7 or 8 miles. Mom. Fasapam X 1 million. TLDR. Mom's thought her $40 wireless setup at home would enable her to get online anywhere in the world. At first I thought it was anal pee blaring out of her laptop loud enough for you to hear it through the phone. Back in the day when text messages were a new thing, I came out of the shower to hear my dad on the phone with his wireless service provider. So I've called my voicemail 3 times and the message icon won't go away. Long pause. A text message? What is that? I don't want those. Sends them all the time now. My dad's fingers are too large for his phone keyboard. He also signs his messages like an email. Messages with usually come out something along the lines of "Wait yip, LVE, dad." Someone trolled my dad teaching him a bunch of meaningless etiquettes, the most outrageous of them being that one should position the mouse pointer at the middle of a link to click on it, otherwise it will be a bad click and will age the machine faster. My friend's mom read an article about how when you leave things plugged in, even if they're off, they can still draw some electricity. Her solution to this was not only to unplug everything in the house, but also to tie the end of every electrical cord into a knot to prevent the electricity from leaking out. My mother literally cannot understand that I can't hear the messages she leaves on my cell voicemail as she leaves them. I've tried to explain many times that it doesn't work the same way as a home phone answering machine. And I still repeatedly get voicemail messages that go, "Honey, are you home? Pick up sweetie. Hello, hello, etc." When we got to Wii Station I would play sports with my mom. Initially, when we played tennis she would be running around the room waving the controller around madly. It wasn't until she fell over a couple couches and hurt herself did I have the heart to tell her, "You stand still." Wii Station. Till that my mother is relatively tech savvy for her age. She can type, email and has even been known to find a website. My mom punishes me by taking the power cord to my laptop and my desktop, and then she pulls up Netflix movies and watches them non-stop until the laptop dies. She then hands me the dead laptop. Clever woman. Whenever my parents want to use Google, they go into Chrome. Google, Bing. Go to Bing. Search Google, go to Google, and then search what they want. I actually had a professor doing this once. He googled Google on the overhead during class to Google the school's website. Would have been okay with his said class was not information system strategy. My mom downloaded Chrome and made it her main browser. She disliked it, so she wanted to go back to Internet Explorer. Instead of just switching her main browser to IE, she reformatted the computer. My dad buys a new memory card for his camera every time his fills up. He doesn't want to delete any of the photos, ever, for any reason. Also this is my uncle, but he took some photos with a digital camera, got them printed out at a photo store, mailed them to me without a note or any explanation, and then called a week later to see if I got them. Freaking email, how does it work? I have to preface this with I swear this is true because it seems so unbelievable. Last summer, my mom asked me to figure out why she couldn't get on her banking account. So I went to the shortcut in her favorites and tried to log in and asked for her password. Mom, me. Okay, just tell me the whole word. Mom, that's it. It's just me. WTF, are you freaking kidding me? How can the bank even allow that? She said it had been like that for years. So I tried and the reply was, "You must change your password," and it had the change password dialog. I asked, "Did you notice this? That it is asking you to change your password?" Mom, "Oh, number. Sorry." So I changed it. Then she said, "I guess I should change Grandma's password. Hers is 1. I crap you not." So my dad asked me to download some software onto his very old computer and whilst doing so, I noticed that the disk drive wasn't opening and assumed that because it is at knee height, one of my parents must have accidentally kneed it or something. My dad however was 100% convinced that whilst I was downloading software, I had downloaded a virus and now it is stuck in the disk drive like a pancake. His words, not mine. TLDR. My dad believes viruses are physical entities, similar to pancakes. Parents of Reddit, what's something your kids have admitted to you that you wish they never would have told you? Similar to Canada's. I told my blind son when he lost his first tooth at age 6 that he looks like a jack-o'-lantern. He immediately ran over to the full-length mirror and twisted his head every way he could to try to see his mouth. He has a little peripheral vision. When he couldn't see himself he climbed back in bed with me and said, "Daddy, I wish I could see my smile." Broke my heart. This is just heartbreaking on so many levels. Apparently, when I was 7/8, I told my mom that the reason her father had killed himself was because he didn't want to meet me. I don't remember it, but she says it made her really sad. Kids are brutal. My elder son was, at the time too. He walks up to me with this disgusted look on his face, grabs my hand, pulls it towards his mouth and spits out a chewed up turd. He then says, "Daddy, I bite poo. I wish to God I hadn't seen, known of, or been nearby for that." My sister said our friend's barbecue was the best she's ever had right next to my dad who makes the same barbecue all the time. I could see my dad was a little hurt. Dang, that stings. Not a parent, but an aunt. My niece was abused by her uncle by marriage, no relation to me, for over a year. She's only 8 now and this happened from around 5-6 years old. After we talked about it among the adults, we agreed not to bring it up unless she started the conversation. But she has taken it all to heart and internalized a lot of negative feelings about herself because of what she suffered. One day, we were playing a board game and she just says, out of nowhere, "I wish I would die." We talked about it, and I did my best to comfort her, but nothing has ever broken my heart like hearing those words come out of her mouth. She's my favorite person in the world, and she's going through heck right now. Sometimes, the world is really unfair. My nephew is in the 1st grade this year. He is having difficulties with the material this year and is awaiting testing for learning disabilities. The other day my sister was a little stressed out and he said, "It's okay mommy, your brain is like mine." When you try to think your brain just goes all crazy. It's really heartbreaking to hear that coming from him. He's an amazing kid who can rattle off facts about the things he's interested in, like Egypt, tornadoes, volcanoes, trains, and so many more subjects. He's so smart and funny. He just has trouble learning the way his school is teaching. I hope little dude gets the right help. After a rough day of me being cranky because his behavior was driving me nuts, I went into my 7-year-old's room while he was in the shower and found a picture he had drawn of a stick figure in the middle of 2 rows of stickman heads. The speech bubble for the head said ha 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 and there was an arrow pointing to the middle stickman with a comment that read, his name, the worst boy in the whole world. This broke my heart. I ended up crossing out the ha 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 bits and replacing them with we love you and you're the best and crossed out worst boy and replaced it with most wonderful boy and left it on his desk for him to find. When he found it and came in to see me, the happy smile on his face made it all better again. Nor that's so sad. I used to think I was the worst child ever. I would punish myself by sitting outside in the middle of NZ winter only in my underwear. Being bullied sucks. It's not that I wish I didn't know, it's that I wish there was nothing to know. H addiction. 20 bags a day, 30 on Fridays because party. She's 30 days clean. I know what the statistics are. I'm not expecting miracles. I'll take every day I have. I hate my new gold-digging stepmother and her 2 bitchy rat-faced daughters. My son then proceeded to detail words and actions of the 3 of the above. He was already in therapy, so I mentioned it to the therapist who wasted no time bringing them all in for a family therapy session. My son repeated what he told me. His dad defended his new wife. She abruptly left the room after she told my son to frick off. He was 12, and my ex ran after her. My son refused to ever live with share any part of his life with his dad again. I don't so much wish he never told me. I wish it never happened how it all went down. If the dad chose his new wife over his son, then I'm pretty sure he's better off with you. My son admitted to me that he had sex with 2 girls while I was in the kitchen baking him a cake for his 16th birthday. One was keeping watch at the door while the other had sex with him. Then they switched. I remember them shyly leaving the house after I yelled down the hall to tell him his cake was finished. We have always had open dialogue about everything, but this was one piece I could have gone without knowing. My son told me he was tired of living in his body. He is 14 years old and has spastic cerebral palsy. Even though he always has a smile on his face, I always questioned in my mind whether or not he was in pain. He is developmentally and mentally age appropriate. Speech is normal, and his disability is mainly physical. He walks with a walker, wears leg braces, and is constantly fighting his muscle tone. The sentence that he spoke killed me. I wasn't ready. We cried together. And because he's a friggin' awesome kid, he ended up wiping my tears and telling me it was okay. Most days are great, but the ones that aren't are really sad. I love him, and I wish I could take away his pain. My daughter went into a serious downward spiral around age 15. She was suicidal, and eventually ended up being institutionalized. I was visiting her, and she told me one part of her story, which was she was raped in her school bathroom. That hurt like heck to hear. The doctors were also helping her deal with something else, hearing voices. When I was sitting at the same visit, I asked her, "So, do you hear voices right now?" She said yes. I paused, and then asked her, "So what are they saying?" And she said, "Kill yourself. Kill yourself now. Kill yourself. Kill yourself now." Not a parent, but my mom tells me that she wishes I never told her. You're the reason why I don't drink. Man, alcoholism sucks. I have schizophrenia. I told my dad after about 2 months that I was having random episodes where I would feel a great need to kill someone when I was 17. That broke him a little inside. My son has just started speaking complete sentences. Sometimes he doesn't know how to convey his feelings. He hugged me the other day and told me he was sad. I asked him why and he said, "Because you can't put me night night today. His mom and I are separated and I was dropping him off." I wanted to cry right then. I went through the same thing with my son at that age. The divorce was still what was best for everyone. He's 37 now, happily married with more kids than I could ever handle. He turned out to be a great father. Best of luck. Dialogue between me and my mom. I've been going through sporadic episodes of psychosis for as long as I can remember, but it was always dismissed as typical butthole child syndrome. When I was involuntarily admitted to inpatient from my university, my mom finally took me seriously. "Mom, do I scare you?" Yes. I got slapped with some perspective that day. I admitted to my dad I had a beer stash in my room. He was cool about it. Then my mom found it and lost her crap and almost kicked me out of the house. This happened to my friend, except he has a monumental stash of V energy drinks. He drinks about 10 a day, sleeps 3-4 hours a night and games for about 10-15 hours. I don't even know how he's still alive to this day. I have been very open with my stepdaughter, 18F, about relationships, sex, etc. I can't say I really wanted to hear today that she is having sex, but on the other hand, I'm glad she told me so I can get her some birth control. It's just really uncomfortable when your stepchild, who is now an adult, tells you she's having sex. But I didn't express that, of course, and talk to her again about birth control, condoms, emotional stuff with relationships, etc. My wife told me that when we were dating, she asked her dad for condoms. He never said a word to me about it. My son was 8. He looks up at me from an app game he's playing and says with a completely serious face and tone, "Daddy, if you were a zombie I'd hit you in the face with a pie, then stab the pie. I'd be sad, but I'd have to man up." I'm the kid, but I'm a guy, and was dealing with an eating disorder. It was pretty hard for mom to take in, and she has acted differently towards me ever since then. This is coming from me. 17M. About a year ago I admitted to my parents that I was depressed and had been to the point of almost pulling the trigger. After I told them, my mom insisted on me talking to her every day for at least an hour about emotional stuff. I'm glad I told them, but when my mom does that kind of crap it makes me feel awkward and wish I had never told her. I promise it won't be the awkwardness that you remember. I'm glad someone loves you like that. My sister, 19 years old, told my dad that as soon as she had the money she was getting the frick out of here, that she never gets treated well, and that she wishes she still lived with our biological parents, who are drug addicts in NJ, USA. We're both adopted. My dad wakes up at 3 AM every day, works from 5 AM to 6 PM anywhere from 5 to 7 days a week, pays for her schooling 100%, puts his job on hold for her, goes out of his way to do little things to cheer her up unprovoked, and continues to do so despite her bulls and verbal abuse. He snapped when she said it and told her that if she has any more outbursts he was going to pack her crap up and change the locks. But I know he won't. Instead, he'll just wonder if he's a crappy dad, if his adopted kids, sister and I, wish our parents never adopted us, and suppress all of those sad feelings until everything is swept under the rug again and she sweet talks him because she wants something. Every time she does this crap, I can totally see the invisible weight piling up on him, and he gets really quiet and withdrawn. The poor papa. Tell your dad what you feel about him, he'll feel a million times better. I'm a college freshman and I know exactly what my mother would say. I received a full scholarship to go to an elite, top 30 ranked college that is about an hour away from home. I moved into the dorms there and everything went downhill from there. I had no friends and my floor mates ostracized me and I sunk from someone with depressive tendencies to thinking about and planning my suicide all day. About a month ago I moved back home and my parents couldn't understand what the problem was. My mom was folding laundry the first night I was back home and asked me could it have really been that bad, and I told her that if I kept living at school that I wouldn't have lived to see Christmas. Just from the look on her face I know she wished I never told her that. Not a parent, but growing up my mom was a real hard butt, sort of like an Asian tiger mom. She didn't want me doing anything that didn't help my grades in school, so I couldn't hang out at friends' houses, watch TV, play video games, etc. She is also slightly neurotic, and whenever anything goes slightly out of line she either flies into a fit of rage or breaks down sobbing really hard. All that meant a lot of stress on kid me, and I worked my butt off to always be on top of the class in grade school. I was also constantly afraid of making her angry, so I never spoke up to her, or really, never spoke to her at all, about anything. I moved to a bigger city right before middle school, and the kids there were much more competitive, so I ended my first year there about 2 or 3 spots from the top. My mom lost it, and started saying stuff like she wished she never had me, how I didn't love her enough to put effort in school, making me hate myself for being such an ungrateful kid. I suppose my mom thought this would make me a little more motivated, but it had the complete opposite effect and made me hate going to school every day. By the time I was 16 I was a depressed wreck, skipping classes, walking around aimlessly wherever my feet would take me. My mom sees my report card and she goes apeshit. Just absolutely crazy. Said things I don't even want to remember. I hated myself more than anything else that night. Long story short, I tried to kill myself. Slipped a note under her bedroom door telling her how I was sorry for being such a disappointment, and how I didn't want to be a burden to her anymore. Fortunately I didn't die, but since then things have only gotten worse. She basically acts like I don't exist. Some days I would catch her looking at me, and I see a fear in her eyes, like I'm some kind of monster. I went back to school, worked to support myself during college, and I'm now a pretty well-adjusted person in my early 30s with a promising career. I've never heard from my mom since I moved away, and now we've pretty much lost contact. Sometimes I think of trying to find her, but then again I don't think she'd want me to. I don't know how my mom feels about all this, but mom, I wish I never told you how much I hated my life. Not a parent, but once when I was 14 I had just gotten a glimpse of who my mom was at my age, and for some reason I told her I probably wouldn't be friends with her if we had gone to the same school. I was thinking personality wise, she was a basketball player with tons of friends. I was more of the loner average kid who played around with weed. She played it off, but I could tell she was a bit hurt and I wish I could take it back. Don't feel too bad. I wouldn't have gotten along with my parents when they were in high when I was that age either. I told my mom this. She was like, yeah, probably not. Different worlds, man. We get along smashingly right now though, and that's what really matters. My daughter is 13 and in 8th grade. She is beautiful, brilliant and sarcastic as heck. She is amazing. She has wanted to be a doctor for as long as I can remember. 3 months ago she broke down and told me that she wishes she were dead because of how mean people can be. She is haunted by an extreme bullying case from 5th grade that she just can't seem to get over. She still sees herself through the eyes of that fricked up 5th grade girl who called her ugly, weirdo, and bucktooth that nobody likes, even though she's had braces and, not kidding, is absolutely gorgeous. She just can't see herself the way her dad and I do. She had started therapy, and she and I have a fantastic relationship. Always have, but this revelation tears me apart because it makes me realize that no matter how much I tell her I love her, no matter how smart or pretty she is, no matter how much I tell her that, the words of peers will always win out until her self-worth is ironclad. Not my child, but at 19 I told my mother I was addicted to coke. She took it better than I thought. She's a pretty great woman, but she later told my dad and he didn't talk to me for a while. I was hoping he'd be angry and lecture me on how much of a dumbass I was, but instead I got the I'm disappointed in you treatment. I had to quit after telling her, too, and withdrawals were awful for little 19-year-old me. That stuff will rot your teeth. My mom told me that it was when I said I didn't the world was a good place. This was after her getting a terminal liver failure diagnosis and my father going through an awful time trying to quit drinking. I thought life was painful and didn't really believe it was going to get better. She just looked disappointed and said, I always thought you were different. She just kind of walked away and died a month and a half later after pretty much going crazy due to the liver failure. In truth, the world is definitively not a good place, but with some luck and some work we can at least make the world around us a good place. Just wanted to say that, you know, you weren't wrong. This is coming from the perspective of someone battling, and at this point mostly handling, depression. I'm 15. But my parents haven't talked to me the same since I told them I've been pretty depressed. The initial look on their faces is crystal clear on my mind. My mom looked contorted and fearful, with my dad's stern look staring at me, a soft look I've never really seen before then. It broke my heart to see them like that, and I hate that I even told them that. I hated how my parents reacted too, but believe they need to know. Depression is really hard to keep inside and trying to work it out on your own is awful. They are sad because their baby is hurting and they don't know how to fix it. I went through a lot of health problems recently. They never really found out what or why. Essentially severe stomach pain, constant vomiting, inability to eat. I lost a lot of weight, got prescribed hydrocodone which I ended up with a physical dependence on and attended school while going through the withdrawal symptoms. I missed a month of school senior year, lots of app and honors classes, and ended up on citalopram because of depression and anxiety over being so far behind. I know, I'm joining the army of kids who've commented here, and I know it was unavoidable for my mother, but some of the things I said while I was in pain, and what I went through, she's super concerned all the time now. Little remarks I make on my health and how I feel tend to make her so stressed, and she's stressed with work as is. I just feel bad that I'm the source of that much stress for her all the time and wish I could take back some of the things I said. I never realized how much impact they would have. I can't admit anything to my parents. They'd freak out, so it kind of brought a distance between us that only I know about. When I was in my early teens, my father showed me a suicide note he had written, expressing how he wished he could end his life so that my siblings and I could use the insurance money to rebuild and start new and happy lives. Not a day goes by where I don't reflect on that day and contributed to an attempt at taking my own life. When I told him, he made it clear that his decisions and actions have no impact on my own and that suggesting such was stupid. I can tell it isn't the worst thing I've told him and he wished I hadn't, but part of me wishes it was the case and that it actually clicked in his mind. Not a parent, but from a kid who was pretty much a nephew of mine. I called him smart, and he got this sad look on his face and said that he isn't. I asked him why he'd think that. He says mommy said I'm not very smart. I tried to keep calm and asked him what else she said. The summary was mommy said I'm ugly, stupid, and no one will love me but her. This kid was completely knocked down by his mom. I knew she was a psycho before this, but god freaking dang. As a child when I was 3 or 4 I told my mom I was mad at my uncle because he didn't show up to my birthday party. I used to go see this uncle about once a week and hang out at breakfast. Well little me didn't understand he died earlier that year. I made both my mom and aunt cry that day. That he got my new car to 143. Yes, I know it's fast, but don't tell me you took my less than 2-month-old car out and drove it that fast. I got it to 150. I'm the kid in this scenario, but definitely my issues with depression. They are supportive and helpful, but it is harder to tell them now when I am struggling with any emotional problem. They are terrified of what I might do if I'm really upset, so I can't be sad in front of them for more than 5 minutes before they insist I should just be over it already. I love them with all my heart, but whenever I'm in a horribly sad mood I know that I should reach out to friends for help first. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.